OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Right, you're very welcome along to this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. It's Jerry Gilroy here with you all the way until 10 o'clock. We're going to drop in and out with Will O'Callaghan a little bit later on to get some of his thoughts on what's been happening in the world of sport. It's been a fairly busy 24 hours with reports yesterday that the Ryder Cup is going to be kicked back a year. Paul Carrington is saying on the back of one of the papers this morning that he's in the dark about that, but it does look as if the Ryder Cup won't be happening in 2020. We can now expect that to happen in 2021. That's what the prevailing wind, that's the direction that it's blowing anyway over the last 24 hours. We'll see if any announcement on that is imminent. If you want to get involved in any of the conversations that we're having this morning, you can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number. We'll obviously be reacting to the airplane that flew over saying White Lives Matter Burnley. Apart from the shocking lack of punctuation, obviously a boneheaded move on the part of anybody who doesn't really understand exactly what's going on at the moment. But it is an interesting moment for an airplane to take off over a Premier League game where the players are all wearing shirts that say Black Lives Matter. I'm going to speak with Daniel Harris about this general movement in football at the moment, centred around obviously Marcus Rashford and the role that he's played in a couple of different political acts over the last while, and general conversation about football as well. That's coming your way at around about 8:10 this morning. The rest of what's coming up this morning, I'm going to go through the sports pages with Will around about 8:35. Going to talk about the Irish in the AFL on the back of a fairly savage backlash against one individual who apparently is bringing down the entire house of cards by testing positive for COVID or not, as the Essendon performers are trying to prove. So we'll talk about that with Nicholas Walsh at around about 8:45, and then going to talk rugby with James Connolly just after 9:05 this morning. He is an ex-Connacht player who obviously was part of Pat Lam's squad that won the Pro 14 and has just been released in England, so at 27, and currently without a club, and obviously no clear sign just yet of when rugby is going to be allowed back to normal. It's an interesting situation he finds himself in. And then Diarmuid Lyng is going to join us at around about 9:30 this morning to talk to us about a new art project that he's been working on, which involves the new sport of hurling, which is hurling and surfing at the same time. Not many men in the world could manage to actively hurl and surf at precisely the same moment, but Diarmuid Lyng can pull it off, and we've got the footage to show you for that. So we'll show you that around about 9:30 this morning. First though, we want to bring you this. It's a very special feature interview. I don't know if you're all listening to OTB Sports Radio on the new OTB Sports app, but yesterday there was a brilliant interview that Brian O'Driscoll had done with Isa Nasewa just after Isa retired. I don't know if you all remember how Isa Nasewa went out, but it was kicking a last-minute penalty to win another European Cup for Leinster. So 3 weeks after that, they sat down and did a long feature-length interview, career retrospective. It was brilliant stuff. Went out yesterday between 6 and 7, and that's the type of good stuff that you're getting on OTB Sports Radio at the moment. But also exclusive to the OTB Sports app has so far been this interview between Brian O'Driscoll and Jamie Dornan, not a noted sportsman, but more famous for his acting and generally for being pretty handsome. So this interview has been exclusively available on the OTB Sports app over the last while, and we're now making it available more broadly to that. You can get it on our YouTube channel, and of course you can get it right here on OTB AM and on OTB Sports Radio. Here's Brian O'Driscoll and Jamie Dornan.
Lunch is the thing I really struggle with. I really struggle with knowing what to have. What I want for lunch is a ribeye steak, a load of chips, and 3 different veg. Like, honestly, that's what I could take down.
That's so country. It's like dinner in the middle of the afternoon.
Is it? Yeah, well, maybe it is, but like, I'm starving then,
We end up, because my parents were both doctors, and they didn't have time in the evening to do it. So we used to always have our dinner. But then when I said that to some of my friends, they were like, "What are you doing? That is such a country bumpkin thing to do."
Really, yeah.
Yeah. And then tea is tea time, yeah.
Tea is tea. I mean, I grew up eating tea late because my dad is a doctor too, and he used to just not get home till about 8. And we used to have dinner at 8. And actually, the hungriest I am in the day is about 4:30. I don't care. Even if I have allowed myself a ribeye and chips and everything for lunch, I'm starving at 4:30. I'm stuffing bags of biltong and anything I can get my hands on into me. And then eat a massive meal again at 8 once the kids are down,
Yeah.
But my wife's an amazing cook, like really brilliant.
Okay.
I'm pretty good, and I have like a few things that I'm pretty good at. And I sort of, looking back now, if we look back at this lockdown period, probably should have pushed myself a bit more in terms of the things that I can cook. But I'm very good at the 3 or 4 like favorite things that I'm good at.
Not over yet. You've got time.
It's true. It's true.
Don't no defeatist. Just
listen. I know.
Start this weekend.
I've taken on ribs, which I've shared the recipe with you.
It was an outstanding recipe.
Great recipe. That's a great book in general, by the way. That's a great barbecue. I'm also just such a meat. Like I'm just meat. I'm so Irish when it comes to food and with just meat and potatoes. Like, I mean, I could just live on that. I could probably count on 2 hands the meals I've had without meat. I'm talking breakfast, lunch, and dinner in my entire life. Like, I'm just terrible. Like, I'll have, you know, there's so many times Millie will be like, so I'm gonna do this quinoa thing with, you know, asparagus and an egg on top of thing, and I'll be like, and she goes, oh, don't worry, like I'll put lardons in there or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, sounds great. I literally can't even envisage eating it without meat in there.
And do you grow some of your own stuff in your garden?
You can't grow meat in the garden, no.
Do you have animals? No.
Sorry.
Do you have any animals? Besides
a horse.
No eating dogs, but do you have any cat?
No,
any
got some bats. Got some bats. Bats are good if you can catch them. We've got a horse. We have 2 goats. We have 5 chickens, and a dog. So it's lively enough. Chickens do about 10 eggs a day. That's pretty good.
Quality?
Yeah, really good. Really good. So we have, and then, you know, we grow chilies and some stuff like that. Muck around with potatoes sometimes, but, you know, tried to do potatoes for Christmas a couple of years ago. I grew them ourselves, and I went down to pick them up, you know, a few days before Christmas, and I've been in there for a few months, and I was like, this is going to be perfect. And Elsie Dulcie, our eldest, was helping me pick, and she started digging first. She was like, Daddy, I've got one. I was like, oh my God, it's actually working. She pulled out a potato, and literally that's they were talking like 16 people we were having over from Ireland for. It's like, yeah, let's go.
Potato fries for Christmas, yeah.
But I like to be better, but you know, it's time and kids, and it's time to grow your own stuff.
And who does that? Is that you that kind of tends to the garden, or
you can't even get it out? We have
a rhetorical question, but go on, answer it anyway.
And look, we've a bit of space here, you know. We have a bit of space, so no, we have Max, we have our gardener who's here. He's here 5 days a week. He's here, and he's unbelievable.
You're a big sports fan. Have you struggled not having live sports on like everybody else, or is it something that you watch a lot of, or do you have the time to watch it?
Yeah, I tell you, I have a bit of a gym set up here. So when I'm training at home. When I've got, you know, kettlebells and whatever I have, and a running machine, I've got Peloton. I've got all this stuff down there, which is great. And one of my favorite things about having it all there is I have a TV in there, and I just exclusively watch Sky Sports Golf on it. And I've been loving watching, actually, all the Solheim Cup replay stuff. I'm just loving this. That seems to be on the most. Bit of Ryder Cup stuff, Old Opens, you know, all those Chronicles of a Champion, all that. I can't get enough of all that, you know. And then I found myself, I sent you those pictures to you a couple of weeks ago, last week, watching this Lions second test, 2009. I found myself doing that because of, genuinely missing rugby. And, you know, rugby and golf have been my 2 sort of main sports. I'm a big football fan, soccer fan. But I found myself, I've been missing that. But like as the years have gone on, I've been less and less into it. It's sort of the thing that with having a family and stuff has subsided a wee bit is football. But rugby and golf, I feel I need. But it's interesting, mate. Like I was thinking, you know, you take it all away, and yes, look, we're all missing it, and we all love it, and we don't need it. You know, you think you really need it, and you look at the you know, let's take golf and these tournaments you have these Rolex events and the money that they're for and all this stuff, and like it's sort of, when you take a step back from it, all just seems a wee bit too much. Do you know what I mean?
Do you reckon? Do you not think?
I do. I just think the money involved, when you think it, look at like no one's having it apart from whoever set up Netflix. No one's having a great day at the office financially in this time. I don't know. There's been a bit of that thing of like how much people are struggling, and then I've just been a bit like, Jesus, golf tournaments and the money that's played for every week, and does there need to be such big events every week, and such huge money, and you come 50th and you still get 10 grand, and I don't know. It's just made me look at it a bit differently. But by the way, I'll still be gagging for it when it comes back. You know what I mean? But it's made me assess it a little different.
Have you played golf since they opened the courses back up?
Yeah.
A lot.
I got out this morning. Actually, yeah. Listen, I'm lucky, but just before Christmas, I put in a golf simulator into my house, and so I played more golf than most people. I was actually texting with Rory a few weeks ago, and I was like, "Have you played any golf?" He said, "Haven't hit a ball in 7 weeks." I'm here with like blisters on my hands from playing so much golf in my room. So it's been nice because I've taken out the real golf now, and I'm playing the best golf of my life, I have to say. Which isn't great golf, but I'm hitting.
So what's your go-to course on the simulator?
It's funny, the company who make it are an Asian company, so there's a lot of Chinese courses and a lot of Japanese courses I've never heard of.
Right.
Some South Korean courses. But then it has, a couple of the roster for us for the Dunhill. It's got Kings Barnes, and it's got St Andrews, all 3 or 4 courses at St Andrews. So I play the old course St Andrews a lot because, you're hoping that every October you'll be there for real, getting your Dunhill invitation, and because, let's be honest, it's quite a scoreable course. It's not, if you're hitting it quite well, you'll play well at St Andrews. So for a confidence booster, or if you're thinking about having the simulator, is you tinker so much because you can. So you'll be watching something on Sky Sports and McGinley will say something about strong left-hand grip or something. You're like, downstairs and try that, and you do it.
But you have a telly down there by the simulator, so can you kind of get your tips from it and then literally go and hit shots immediately?
No, I mean, I'm willing to take the 10-second journey away from that TV to get down there.
Green shot. I must listen. I must see what he said next. Up the stairs. Makes sense, all right. No wonder you've got calves like Phil Mickelson.
Well, he has calves like me. I brought the iPad down there just a couple of times, and often I like, which I was able to do before Christmas when there's still golf on, and early in the new year. Or there wasn't golf on there, but I would bring, if there's live sport on, if there's football or whatever, and I wanted to hit balls, I'd bring my iPad down there and I'd be able to watch it while I hit balls, which is kind of a dream. It's also, it's good. It's good setup.
So where do you ordinarily play your golf? Is it locally to where you're living now?
Yeah.
Or, yeah?
So I live in Gloucestershire, and a club called Minchinhampton. It's got 2 new courses, 36 holes new, and then it's got an old course on the Common, which is like linksy. That is, I played it for the first time. There's a 9-minute walk from my front door, which is pretty great. So, and the weather's been unbelievable. So I've been out. It's been really nice.
I'm out this afternoon. Actually, I'll give you a laugh. I'm on the bike with the clubs on the shoulders. I said to my missus there. She goes, "What?" I haven't done it for 25 years, but I want to have a few drinks especially distancing drinks in Connor Ridge, Shane Lowry's manager's house after playing golf with him. So yeah, I said, no, I'm going to get the bike down there with the clubs on and helmet. She's like, I want a picture of that. No, you can't. I've got my golf shoes on here now, ready to go, ready to sprint out the door.
Nothing else, just that shirt and some golf shoes.
It looks that way. I got a pair of pink shorts on, and trust me, I do not have dark complexion skin, so it looks as though it could be in the buff. But do you, from a rugby point of view, you played a bit of rugby to a good standard?
What is a good standard? I mean, compared to you, probably not a great standard. But I played an okay standard. I played in the first at Methody, which is a big rugby school. But only in my upper sixth year, not in fifth year or lower sixth. In fact, I was nowhere near it either of those years.
Back three on the wing, fullback.
I was out half until upper sixth, and then moved on to the wing when they realised I did the 100 sub 11. So it was, I didn't really have a choice. And also because at 10 I probably ran it too much myself, and they thought maybe give me a bit more space. And David Wells, who was our coach, who's sort of iconic figure up in the north, decided to move me on the wing. And then I
love that you've spun that positively. That's so good. It's always a promotion from 10 to the wing, isn't it? Hands, you forgot to leave. You left out the hands like feet part. No.
Hold on. Let's. It's funny. Obviously, because of what I'm saying about me being quite a positive person, I've only ever seen it that way. just with his pace, we just have to make use of him out there. So anyway, school, and then to be honest, I played my best rugby ever the year after I left school. But weirdly, I was still at school. I repeated sixth form after my mom died, and I stayed an extra year at school. And obviously, I was too old to play for Methody anymore. I was very young for my original year, so I was only missed out by a month or something, which was annoying. But so I couldn't play at school, so I played Belfast Harlequins. I played the Harlequins under 23, and yeah, at the end of that year, which is probably trying to coax out of me because you know it very well, I had an Ulster under 21 trial. That, you've heard about more than once.
How did it go again?
Well, listen, I'm sat here 18 years.
What could have been?
18 years later as an actor. I wasn't good. It wasn't good enough. I think I could have played a decent club, All Ireland Division 2 probably, and been in the stages and as a real job, getting your hunt. Back then, I remember I played for Harlequins first twice. Then when I was 19, and got 50 quid each time to play, and I remember thinking this is unbelievable that you could get handed money to play rugby. And then I went off to uni, played for a bit. Didn't go to a good rugby uni or whatever, but moved back, fly half at uni, back to 10. And then I had a big decision to make about going back to uni, and I didn't want to go, and I wanted to move to London. At uni, and I had an England Universities trial in the August, at the end of the August, and I said, to be honest, that's the only reason I'd want to go back for the England University trial, which is some nonsense. So he was like, well, if that's it, then I'm happy to let you step out of uni and follow your gut, which I did.
And would you keep an eye on Ulster's progress? And obviously you're a big Irish fan. Anytime would you go to a bit of trouble to go and watch an Ireland game if you're in a foreign country?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. Particularly if it's a big game, it's an important game. I've had. Jesus, I think back now. It's. Back. This is going to sound like sort of, when I was at school, when I was growing up, every Friday night every other Friday night would be at Ravenhill. It's a big thing going to Ulster matches and those Friday night games. And I had some great memories of going to watch Ulster then, and, running on the pitch to try to get Gary Longwell's autograph after, those are the days. And then I think when I first moved to London, fell out of interest with Ulster a wee bit, just because you're away and you're doing different things, and it's just it wasn't on my radar as much. And then more recently, I probably got back into following Ulster closely. But with Ireland, I've never wavered. It was just a big thing for me growing up. We had an apartment in Ranelagh when I was a kid, almost exclusively for when my sister was at uni there and stuff. But when we were younger than that, it was exclusively for international weekends and going down and staying there. And actually, the day I proposed to Millie, we were in LA, and I was out there doing pilot season or whatever, 8-9 years ago. And Ireland were playing Wales in the Six Nations, and there's this pub out in Santa Monica by the beach. It was the only place. It's a bit better now in LA. It was the only place that showed it. You $20 to get in, and it kicked off at like 6 in the morning LA time. So I had Millie up at 5. It was way down the beach, so it was like 45-minute drive. And she was going, what? And I knew I was going to propose to her that day. And she was like, honestly, you're getting me up to go. I was like, you have to come with me. You go yourself. I'm like, no, you have to come with me. Dragged her the whole way to Santa Monica to watch. And we got beaten by Wales. A terrible match. The TV was crap as well. They kept losing their signal. It was dreadful. And Millie was just like, what am I doing with this guy? Like, what a loser. And I was just trying to tell her, like, your day's going to get better. Or maybe it's not. But in my head, it's going to get better. I make an effort to watch Ireland, definitely. Yeah.
Tough crowd, getting blamed for bad broadcasting.
Yeah, but listen, I paid 20 quid.
Did you get your breakfast for 20 quid as well?
Yeah, if someone cooks it for me, I'll eat it.
Just before you go, what are you watching at the moment? You talked about Netflix. Are you someone that delves into the deepest, darkest parts of Netflix, or do you just skate on the top along with everybody else? I.e., have you watched The Last Dance?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, with Netflix? I think there's other platforms that it's sort of easier to find good stuff, if I'm honest with you. With Netflix, they sort of quite forceful in what they want you to watch, aren't they? And it's like they have picked their prize asset for the week and they are shoving it down your throat when you get on there. So some stuff you can't avoid. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just sometimes it means you miss out on some other great stuff that's on there that you have to hunt about for a wee bit. But yeah, we did. Have you heard of this thing, Normal People? Nobody's talking about it. This tiny show.
I've started the book twice and not completed it. So my missus is raving about it. Says it's really good.
Like it's brilliant. They are brilliant. It's very nuanced, beautiful work. The two leads. So yeah, we took The Last Dance. Yeah, of course.
Did you watch it with Millie?
No, I didn't. But there's a few people that are sort of above the sport and above. They are more than just a player in the game, and Jordan's obviously one of them. And so I thought it would be sort of enough to get Millie involved. And she didn't really have any interest. I mean, look, there's a lot of it she'd say she would have interest in, and then there is some stuff that is just very much about the season and losing to Orlando Magic and what that meant and all this sort of stuff. But it's phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, what an athlete, and just the scale of his popularity and his fame and his reach and just the athleticism of the guy. And the whole time, like, smoking massive cigars in the change room.
What's that about? How did you get away with that? I want to understand that. Is that just a look smoke? Surely, is there a little inhale going on there? It's a non-stop smoky fest.
Yeah, you sort of don't with a cigar, don't you? I mean, I think that's the thing about it. It's not like really going into your lungs. It's not great for the inside of your mouth and all this sort of diseases you can get within the mouth, I think. But your lungs are let alone, really, I think, by cigars. I'm not a big cigar guy. I probably have more cigars in the last 12 months than I have in my life, which is about 4 in the last 12 months. But, if you really commit to it, it's like an hour and a half to like fully get through one if you want to finish it. But I'm usually just like at a wedding or, that's when I'll rock one out.
And what's your thoughts on pre-game? I agree with you on Jordan. Do you think, because he's bigger, than other players, do you think he has the right to perceive himself that way as well? Or do you look for a little bit more humility in kind of heroes of the game?
Well, everyone says you were a bit of a prick in the changing room.
Not everyone can be wrong.
Listen, no, and listen, there's some people you let away with a bit more probably, and I think what is interesting is that they kind of all said that he got the best out of them and got more out of them than he would have had he been just Mr. Nice Guy. So there's something in it, and I do think at the heart of it, as much as he had all these like internal battles and like he needed those to get through the games and perform the way he did, there's also like he wanted the team to win.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted them to be champions, you know, every year if he could. So, you know, I there's more allowance for it, you know, than most players because of the quality he had, you know. But then you hear stories that, you know, where people, you just don't have to be like that. Like I'm not, you know, there's lots of brilliant team sportsmen who are not like that and still got the best of themselves and the players around them every week, you know.
Yeah. What's next? What's next for the next couple of months? Like, so you know, I don't know if you're a music goer, but if there were drive-in music gigs, or you know, now that we're going to be seeing Premiership or football coming back, will you watch that? Will you partake, or are you happy with the current existence to go on for another couple of months?
No, I'm ready for things to start to normalise now. I think not that there hasn't been elements of it that I haven't loved, but yeah, no, I think there's a drive-in cinema that's happening near us next week. I think that we might go to, and there's a couple of things like that. A gig in your car? No.
Danny Zuko.
Oh God! Can you imagine? There's just no way. That's not going to work.
Yeah. And what about things like?
You know what I'd love? You know what I'd love? I'd love it if there was like a Glastonbury-esque or something like Glastonbury, or something that was, you know, Glastonbury's obviously at the end of June. That's already been cancelled. There's talk about it apparently being cancelled for next year already. I don't know how that works. But something, if there was something like that was an outdoor like festival, outdoor gig, because we know those days where you're with people you love and all your mates and your wife, whatever it is, and it's in your head, it's always sunny and there's just such a big build up and you're drinking during the day in the sun. They're brilliant days. If there's something like that was in the middle of September or something that seemed like plausible, I would love that. I would just love to have, because imagine the feeling there, the euphoria, and everyone finally able to, you know, because people, you know, as great as it is that it's easing now and people are going to be able to see each other, it's not real yet, you know. It'd be great to have something to really look forward to at the end. It's still clinging on to summer, you know, that's a big outdoor event like that. But I don't know. I mean, where do you stand on the Ryder Cup without fans?
I don't think it works. I don't think it works. That is the Ryder Cup. And if you don't have cheering, if you don't have sledging going on, if you don't have a bit of that, sometimes it's a bit over the top in the States. We're probably guilty of it as well, but it does seem it's more extreme over in the States, where there's a lot of bustling mid shots. And but if you don't have that to rile the players up, you know, I don't think you have the same. It's not the same context of what Ryder Cup has been built on. So I think you're better off pushing it a year if that's the case.
And what about the Celebrity Ryder Cup?
Definitely go with that. You've got to, at all costs, push that ahead, irrespective of whether there's a real Ryder Cup thereafter.
Can we just get it on record here that the only people to win their matches when we were part of the Celebrity Ryder Cup team in Paris were you, me, and Niall Horan, all the Irish people, the only people to bring home the points? Shocking.
What's the plan for the rest of the day?
I promised my kids a bit of proper straight up daddy time now, because it's half term, so we're not even doing homeschooling in the morning, and I stepped out for a bit of golf. So I've got to put some proper time in now, and it's a glorious day. So happily enough, I'll muck around with them for a bit, and then I've hired a car for the last couple of weeks, because when we moved to New York, we thought we weren't coming back for a long time, and we got rid of our cars. So I have the old 1988 convertible Merc that has 2 seats in it. We've been kind of trying to get by on with a family of 5. Absolute nightmare. So I've been having to hire cars here and there, but actually I'm sorted out on Monday. I'm getting a car for a short-term deal. But so I've got to drop a hire car off. All very exciting. And we might have a crack at making pizza on the green egg tonight, which I've never done.
All right. Yeah, make your own dough? No, yeah. Those bases are too easy to buy now. Someone sent me like a yogurt-based dough recipe. I was like, thanks a million. Never trying it.
No.
So, yeah. Chicken on a pizza?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. Is that place in Dublin still open, Miller's?
Yeah, it is. I haven't been for years, but you can get everything and anything.
Yeah, it's like fish and chip pizzas.
Yeah. And it works there, but I don't know whether that's just because they've been doing it for years and they get away with it.
Yeah.
But like if you tried one of those at home, you're like,
no.
what am I doing? Because you'd also make the balls of it too.
Yeah, I'm not for the first time I try a pizza on the green egg. I'm not doing haddock and chips on there.
I haven't done the Kamado Joe pizza yet, so maybe this weekend.
Yeah, give it a whirl.
Listen, brilliant stuff. Thanks for your time this afternoon, and enjoy your play date. And I'm going to go off for 9 holes and a couple.
You only play 9?
Oh yeah, we're only allowed to play 9 at the moment.
Oh yeah, because in the Republic you've been pretty strict, right?
Yeah, I think they have. To be honest with you, 9 or 12 suits me these days.
Yeah.
Like 18, I start getting tired at 15. And any half decent score is thrown away. So 9, 12 holes, getting no trouble at home, gone for 2 hours, and you're back.
Are you telling me the next time we go on a golf tour somewhere, we're going to have to work it around you only being able to play 9 to 12 holes a day?
Well, listen, we missed the first 3 or 4 holes on that last day anyway, so that's only 14 or 15 holes. So that was actually my plan to not wake.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Football is back.
Aguero makes it 3. Chelsea switch off at the back.
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
Yeah, you're welcome back. 3 minutes past 8 here on OTB AM. It's Jerry Gilroy and Will O'Callaghan with you until 10 a.m. this morning. As ever, if you want to get involved in the conversation, you can WhatsApp us. 087 180 180 is the number, or you can always tweet the show using the hashtag OTBAM. I'm going to tell you what's coming up here first before we get into the rest of this morning's stuff. And I'll also turn off the sounds on my computer. Wouldn't that be the smart thing to do as opposed to... Yeah, there you go. Here's what's coming up on the show for you. We're going to be talking about football with Daniel Harris in about 10 minutes' time. Going to get into Marcus Rashford, going to get into the racist banner that was flown over the game last night by some clowns when it was White Lives Matter Burnley. It was the banner that came out the back of an airplane during the 5-0 win for Manchester City. We'll also talk through the sports pages today. Loads of interesting stories, both front and back of the papers, unfortunately, around about 8:30. And after that, we're going to talk about Conor McKenna, and some of the newspapers are reporting that perhaps he may have played his last game in the AFL because the scandal is so big around this. There might be a bit of an overreaction to the fact that he has tested positive for COVID-19. We'll see. We'll get the thoughts of Nicholas Murphy around about 10 to 9 this morning. Diarmuid Lyng is going to join us around about 9:05 to talk about a new short film that he's made. And then James Connolly is a rugby player who is ex-Connacht, but has been playing in England for the last while and has just been released. So we'll talk to him about the uncertainty facing so many young rugby players at the moment. And that's all coming up a little bit later on. In the meantime, Will O'Callaghan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning, Ger. How are things? I'm good.
So you could say that Burnley's performance on the pitch got the just rewards for the White Lives Matter Burnley banner, but that's Burnley's traditional 5-0 result at, or certainly conceding 5 goals whenever they visit Manchester City. So what's new?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, on the field, Burnley obviously playing as they have over the last 4 or 5 seasons. They've had huge problems with Man City. It's a good return to the Premier League for City. I mean, despite these 2 very handsome victories they've had over Arsenal and against Burnley, they're still 20 points adrift of Liverpool, with Liverpool having a game in hand. But Burnley were very poor on the pitch last night. I think it's interesting that Ben Mee said after the game that they were somewhat aware that this protest with the plane might have happened, that Burnley were already prepared before the game was due to take place. Their press officer pretty much already had the statement in place, but they were hoping that the plane wouldn't actually happen. And then they're coming out, and he said the players looked up and could see the plane and they went, right, the rumours are actually true. And then they never recovered in terms of the match on the pitch. City were in absolute control, banged in 3 goals before half-time. Phil Foden had a pretty impressive performance again. Maybe we got a window into what Man City are going to look like when David Silva departs the club for the Middle East in a few weeks' time. And Foden is likely to get more opportunities. The one black spot on the performance for City was Sergio Aguero going down with a knee injury. Pep Guardiola saying after the game it may well be an aggravation of a previous problem which he had a month ago. If that's the case, Guardiola said he's likely to miss the rest of the season. He's going for a scan this afternoon, and he would also miss the Champions League, which is probably more crucial for City than what happens between now and the next 5 weeks in the Premier League. Whether the game is in Lisbon or at the Etihad Stadium, I think they're going to need Sergio Aguero to get through that second leg against Real Madrid. Yeah, look, here's the thing. They really don't care about the league. It's about getting players fit and in form for what might happen in the Champions League. And look, we'll wait and see with that one. The other thing we should talk about here is Jeff Hendrick. So Dan McDonnell was on last night and he was nowhere to be seen for Burnley. Very strong rumours that he's off to Serie A to join AC Milan. Here's Dan McDonnell on last night's football show.
Watching Arsenal now, particularly the game out here. Now they were really lucky in some ways. They got some bad injuries, and that was a hard one for them to take. They've not got the deepest of squads anyway. Guendouzi's in big trouble as well after that. And that's not Dan. That's Pat Nevin from the night before. Dan was essentially saying that there's an imminent deadline. It's not really a real deadline per se, Will. It's a Burnley imposed deadline. Happy with the club with what they've done here, Gerard, because they were very late in offering these contract extensions. The reports yesterday were that Jeff Hendrick has been offered 2 deals. So one would be an extension to stay beyond the end of this season and to commit his future to the club, and the other one will be a short-term extension just to stay for the next 5 weeks to take in the end of the Premier League season. The reports are that Jeff Hendrick isn't too keen on the longer-term one, so himself and I think 5 other players at Burnley currently have not signed extensions, so therefore they were left out of the game last night. We know already that Joe Hart will be leaving the club next week because he's not been offered a new deal, but the others are up in the air. Jeff Hendrick perhaps the most high profile of the lot. We got 2 interviews with Sean Dyche. The first one was last night, was before the game, when he explained the reason for the omission of the players, and then he spoke in a press conference afterwards, and he said that Burnley have set a deadline of today to try and get those players to sign short-term contract agreements. If not, I think he's in the same position that Eddie Howe has found himself at Bournemouth with Ryan Fraser, where Ryan Fraser has made it clear that he's not going to extend his deal, and therefore they're not going to play him for the last 8 games of the season. So Burnley perhaps in a slightly different situation. I know Dan McDonnell was saying this last night to Nathan, to Bournemouth, where Ryan Fraser is likely to become a bit of a villain if Bournemouth go down and he decided not to sign a deal to stay until the end. If Jeff Hendrick doesn't play between now and the end of the season, Burnley are just shy of 40 points. They're staying in the Premier League. It's probably irrelevant enough if the Dubliner plays between now and the end of the campaign. But we kind of all scoffed at the idea of him going to AC Milan. AC Milan are trying to recruit on free transfers this year. They're probably going to miss out on European football as things stand. They're sitting outside the top 6 in Serie A currently. They've had their problems with financial fair play, and it looks like signing a 28-year-old international player on a free transfer may well be something very attractive to them. I mean, it could be a brilliant move for somebody like Jeff Hendrick, where his style of play might suit Serie A in a way that it is actually slightly less suited to the hurly-burly of the Premier League. We've got Sean Dyche in the aftermath of the game. Actually, which one are you going to go to? Dan. Let's go to Dan McDonnell. Here's what Dan was saying last night with Nathan. Have a look.
Yeah, and I mean, I
right. Poor Dan, he's cursed. We'll bring you Sean Dyche in just a minute. We have Dyche. Let's go with that. Here's Sean Dyche.
And the contract situation is just, the club decided to offer month contracts very late in the day and haven't cleared up Jeff Hendrick's contract situation. So then players have had to make a choice, and their choice is to not be involved.
The possibility of Jeff sort of signing anything before tomorrow, this deadline tomorrow?
I don't know. I'm not informed on where it's all at.
Which is a bit mad, Will. That I think for me the weirdest thing here is Dyche is actually having a go at the board and everybody else for not sorting this out before now, and is publicly saying that. So I wonder what's going on there in the interrelationships between him and everybody else, because that's not the type of thing you go public with unless you are very aggrieved.
No, and I think it's been fairly fraught for a while between Sean Dyche and the board at Burnley, because if we go back to kind of late March, early April, he was bemoaning the fact that there were a lot of players whose deals were running down. Burnley want to try and keep these players around, or at least Sean Dyche, I should say, rather than the club wants to keep these players around. He was giving out that the club had done nothing about it going into lockdown. Then lockdown, you would have imagined, would have been the perfect time when all focus is on things off the pitch to go and get those contracts sorted out. And it was very clear once Project Restart was announced nearly a month ago that the contracts were going to be needed to be extended, those that were due to run out on the 30th of June. And it seems the club waited very late, much to Sean Dyche's annoyance, to only offer them last week. And if you're Jeff Hendrick or you're one of the other players of the club who's thinking about what they're going to do for the rest of the year, why take the risk and get injured if your contract is due to run out on the 30th? Loyalty works both ways, and I'm sure those players were probably not particularly pleased that the contract offer to stay for the month only came last week.
Yeah, and look, if the AC Milan interest is real, and we've no reason to think that it isn't at the moment, then you kind of have to go. It's like a dream situation where you get to go from living in Burnley to living in Milan, and I suspect that they're, despite their financial fair play issues, they're also still paying quite well. Let's hear from Ben Mee. Here is the Burnley captain speaking in the immediate aftermath. No questions first about the game, questions first about the ridiculous banner that was flown over the stadium last night. Have a listen.
I'm ashamed, I'm embarrassed to a small number of our fans that have decided to put that around the stadium. Completely missed the point. Group of lads in there are embarrassed to see that, and it's not what we're about at all. Missed the point of the whole thing that we're trying to achieve, trying to do. I think these people that need to come into the 21st century and educate themselves.
Yeah, so if anybody missed it, a White Lives Matter Burnley banner was flown off the back of a plane over the Etihad last night. These plane protests have in the past tended to be kind of japes more than anything, kind of like, certainly that seems mostly my recollection is we want X out, generally Wenger or somebody like that, and you kind of thought, well, look, it's a bit ridiculous, people clubbing together to spend it. But this one is a bit more sinister, Will.
Yeah, I mean, there's much more of a nastiness about this, and it would seem based on some of the posts and the Facebook Live, which was picked up because many Burnley supporters went out to try and find out who the people were that actually tried to organise this, because the last thing they want is the name of their club being dragged through the mud, because obviously Burnley was on the banner that went behind the plane. It said White Lives Matter and then Burnley afterwards. And I think a lot of them were very annoyed. The club obviously put out a very strong statement. We heard from Ben Mee, who said he was ashamed by what had happened. And it seems it was last Wednesday or Thursday when a group of supporters decided to arrange this. And I can't believe that the company that they went to were actually happy enough to fly the banner, because I can imagine you have to go to them, you have to negotiate a price, you have to negotiate a message. And surely at some point, the company who operate that plane could easily have said no. I mean, you obviously don't live in a bubble. They'd have to know about the Black Lives Matters protests, which are taking place at the moment. The fact that players in the Premier League have been taking a knee, and that the banner which says White Lives Matter will be flying over the Etihad Stadium just moments before the game is about to begin. So I would imagine the business are going to be in quite a bit of trouble, and I would think that it's going to be easy enough to find out the people who have organised this and for Burnley to ban them for life.
All right, we'll let you go. Thanks very much for being with us so far this morning. We'll talk to Will a little bit later on as well. At 8:15 now, I'm going to say good morning to Daniel Harris. Daniel, we wanted to talk to you about Manchester United and Marcus Rashford, and a great piece you've written about Marcus Rashford, but we may as well start with the White Lives Matter Burnley plane. I was going to call it a protest, but it's not. It's such a weird thing to have happened. I'm kind of at a little bit of a loss to understand exactly where it's coming from, or even like I don't really understand the point of it, to be honest. I guess the point of it is that we're talking about it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think people felt that they had a point to make. And so they wanted to make the point. And, I mean, they did have a point to make. It was the wrong point, a terrible, awful, disgusting point. It was all of those things, but that's why. And one of the things that is so worrying, terrifying, upsetting about this is how many people it needed to go through to get to where it got through. So someone had to have the idea, then they had to discuss it with their mates. You can imagine the awful WhatsApp patter that went around as they decided to do it. People had to pay for it. You had to find a plane company. The plane company had to be prepared to do it. The pilot had to be prepared to do it. Everyone involved had to be prepared to send a far-right racist message over a football match that was on live television at a time of racial tension, where black people of colour are justifiably still extremely upset. And I don't feel like this is something that white people quite understand, that life for black people, for people of colour, has not just gone back to normal after George Floyd. And I read this in the piece that you mentioned, that people, for this month, we've had people of colour who have been losing sleep, who've been not able to work properly, who've been not able to concentrate, who are constantly discussing their own oppression with each other, with other people who are challenging them. It is a phenomenally stressful, painful time. And then you see something like this. And it's really hard to say, well, what do we do about that? Because we don't really even know how many people did it and how we go about educating people who don't want to be educated. But I think ultimately what we see is that British football reflects British society, and British society has racist elements, is structurally racist, has always been structurally racist. And when we look at our cabinet, we see that. When we look at the behaviour of the Prime Minister, we see that. And it's rotten. And it starts at the top and it goes to the bottom, and it starts at the bottom and it goes to the top.
Well, that's why it's important that we talk about Marcus Rashford and what he's managed to achieve over the very short window of the last 5 or 6 weeks. Look, Marcus Rashford's greatness, actually, when you look back at it, and again, I was kind of unaware of some of the stuff that he'd done in the past around homelessness, for example, and you put it all together, it turns out Marcus Rashford has been a really brilliant person essentially all his life. He's kind of cresting to a point of national significance in England at the moment because of what's happened specifically around school lunches over the last while. But his leadership and his willingness to stand up and to be a leader, even though it's much easier not to be, is something that, it's troubling that we need these people like Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling to stand up, and yet at the same time, you kind of have to be really proud of the fact that they're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I alluded to this in the piece, and I mean, what Rashford's done is amazing, but I think that it's really important to note that in order to be accorded respect and equality and justice, black people don't need to do anything other than to exist. And so it's all very well. Anyone can look at what Marcus Rashford has done and say what Marcus Rashford done is incredible. But what we need as a society to do is look at everyone who, of whatever race, colour they are, and say they have a place in our society. They are people who it's worthy of respecting. And Marcus Rashford probably didn't want to tweet about Black Lives Matter, for example. He doesn't want to be a representative of anyone other than himself. But what happens with a minority is that one member of the minority represents everyone. There's a concept in Judaism, has its own concept for this thing that is called Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem, and one me sanctifying God's name and desecrating God's name. But it's not really about God. It's a communal thing that you have to be aware that as a Jewish person, if you do something, it's not just going to reflect on you, that people will judge the community according to what you do. And I feel like that's the same with Rashford, where people might look at him and say, well, look what Marcus Rashford did, but he's a good one or he's a bad one. But it isn't like that. It's that, as Marcus Rashford tweeted himself, Black lives matter, black culture matters, black communities matter, we matter. And mattering is not any kind of social contract. You don't have to do something nice for society to matter. In order to exist, in order to matter, you just have to exist. And I'm going to I try not to do this very often, but I am going to quote what I wrote in the piece, because I think it's a really important point that since classification was imposed upon them, black people have rarely been afforded the privilege of defining themselves as individuals, of representing themselves as individuals, of simply being. And I think that is the thing now with Marcus Rashford that we need to get over. Anyone can say that they like Marcus Rashford because he's done these objectively good things. But what we have to do as a society is to recognise that Marcus Rashford is of value, not because he did all these things and not because he's good at football, but because he exists. And that applies to every other single person of whatever denomination. Just by existing, they are of value. And it's mortifying and appalling that we're sitting here of a Tuesday morning having to state this, but it seems that we absolutely have to state it, and we have to keep stating it, and that's part of our responsibility as human beings.
The other kind of central theme to your piece is that we shouldn't be constantly asking for people to share their stories of racism for us to understand that they are suffering racism on a constant basis. And I totally understand that, and I've seen many commentators say that they're tired of sharing their stories of being racially abused, and even I think Emma Dabry referred to it as titillation, because there's been a series of stuff in Irish radio in particular over the last fortnight where people have been sharing their stories of being racially abused. And the front page of The Sun this morning has Darren Randolph, the West Ham goalkeeper, talking about being racially abused and how it was actually just a normal thing for him as a child growing up in Wicklow. I understand that. I also feel like there has to come a tipping point where an awareness level is reached, so that you can never just go back and say, well, this is something that is okay, and we live in a post-racist society, or any of the stuff that we kind of took for granted over the last decade or so as we filtered this into an accommodated existence where we kind of felt like everything might not be perfect, but like at least we're trending in the right direction. Whereas now we're clearly not trending in the right direction. Like we've reached a point where things are getting worse, and unless we deal with these on an ongoing basis, we might not actually ever get to deal with them properly.
No, I mean it's an urgent conversation. It was an urgent conversation a long time ago, but it appears that we're now having the conversation at least, and there is a long way to go because prejudice is ingrained, and people who are prejudiced, some people who are prejudiced don't even know that they're prejudiced or the extent of their prejudice. And I think the thing that people need to understand is that the extent of the racism that is endemic within our society, we don't understand it. We don't understand the extent of it. And as I wrote in the piece, I have a handle on this because I'm married to a British Ghanaian. So one half of my family has these stories. But I was chatting to my brother-in-law the other day, and the quantity of stories of encounters with teachers and police and just general people that he has from his youth is, I mean, I don't have the words to describe how staggering it is, the quantity of them and the brazenness of it. And that was some time ago, but then I have another brother-in-law who's a further 10 years younger, and I have a wife who goes out into the world and goes out into employment, and the things that people say that they think are acceptable are staggering. And these are people who've grown up in what you might call more middle-class environments where people are meant to know better, and people don't know better. And I look at myself, and so we've been together for 12 years. I'm a Jew, and a lot of my family died in the Holocaust, so I have a handle on discrimination. But nevertheless, 12 years on, I'm still learning. And let me give another example, I suppose, where, okay, we have a daughter. So my daughter is the thing in the world that is most mine. So I feel that I have some level of ownership and input into my daughter's childhood, into my daughter's life as a normal father. However, despite my 12 years of experience with my wife, and despite my personal experience as grandson of a Holocaust survivor, as someone who's experienced discrimination as a Jew, when we have a racial question that comes up with my daughter, and again, in similar vein, these come up a lot more often than anyone who doesn't have them coming up in her life would think, and a lot more often than we would want. When we have a question on that issue, despite all the things that I might think I have to bring to that issue, and as you know, I'm not shy, I'm not behind the door in stating an opinion when I have one. But when things come up with regard to that issue, I do not state my opinion. I say to my wife, we're in this situation, or she says to me, we've got this situation, and then I say, what should we do? And she says, this is what we're going to do. I might ask for clarification so I understand better, but what I never, ever, ever do is say, but I think this. Because what I think about this does not matter. I don't experience it. I don't experience that kind of racism. I see it happening. It makes me furious. It makes me devastated. And I experience seeing the people who are closest to me hurt by it, but I don't experience it, and therefore I don't have the right or the authority to give opinions about it, ever. Even when it concerns my daughter, which is the thing, as I said, that is most mine in the whole world. And I think that is another thing that we need to understand, the society needs to understand. A lot of people that are used not only to having what they think is an opinion about something, but to having the right opinion about something, and they prove that it's the right opinion about something because that's what people end up doing. But people have to divorce themselves from that, and they have to sit down and they have to listen to people supplying the answers. You wouldn't ask me what it is like to be me, because obviously only I know the answer to that, and even I would struggle to describe that to you. And similarly, when there is something that only affects someone, then you need to listen to that person to understand what it is and do what that person says that you should do to alleviate the situation. And that's what we need to do in this circumstance. We need to listen to the people that experience the situation, that understand it, that know how it feels. And there we will find the answers about how to educate ourselves and what to do to make society better and to make society just and fair and to make society work.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a little bit of the thing that people are grappling with. There's an exhaustion on the part of people of colour telling their story because it feels like they've been telling the same story for such a long period of time. And at the same time, there's an audience that needs to hear this, and it's finding a safe space or a safe way for that communication to happen. I wonder, like, in the midst of all this turmoil, is there any room for a little bit of hope that these conversations are finally happening?
I think so. I mean, as long as we don't get complacent that we're anywhere near finding a solution, because we don't really even know what the solution is yet, never mind having implemented the solution. But there does seem to have been some kind of change where people are trying to learn, people are trying to do better. And yeah, so we're definitely not in a position to start congratulating ourselves, but we're at least having the conversation. And it's devastating what had to happen for that conversation to be one that we're having. But the fact that we are having it is an improvement, and I guess we'll see where we take it before we start making any judgments. But it's not something we can start affecting immediate change immediately by talking to the people who are in our immediate sphere of influence. But the long-lasting social change is going to take years and decades and generations. But every journey starts with a small step, and I think that we have to. There's an obligation on all of us to try and be part of the solution. It's not incumbent upon us to solve the problem, but neither are we free from attempting to solve that problem.
Yeah, I think that, and look, that goes back to Marcus Rashford standing up. It would be great to see a bunch of other people who play football standing up, who aren't people of colour. So the ones who have it really easy, who've had it really easy to get to the point where, you know, they're middle class and they're now full-time Premier League footballers. I'd love to hear from them going, actually, you know what, this has been quite an eye-opening experience for me. And I too have a platform, and I'm going to use that platform to help people. Because there has been this kind of view that footballers, you know, they don't always come from a very well-educated place. And why are we asking them to be responsible for changing social opinion? But actually, it does really feel like you kind of either stand for something or you don't. And if you're just there to make money and whatever it is, and that's who you are, that's fine. But like, don't sell us shoes and don't try and influence us to buy whatever it is the new computer game is that you're trying to sell. People need to stand for something at the moment.
I mean, when we saw that Ben Mee spoke so brilliantly last night, and I think that one of the things I mentioned in that piece was that when Raheem Sterling was being attacked by the British press, none of his teammates said anything. Gareth Southgate didn't really say very much. Manchester City didn't say anything. What they could have done was they could have banned the papers that were attacking him. They could have banned the Mail and the Express. They could have banned them. Probably, they could have refused to give interviews to those journalists. The teammates could have spoken up, but no one did anything. And I agree with that. That now the time has come, as we said earlier, it's not for black people to educate us about racism. It's for people to acknowledge that racism exists. If people that experience it are talking to us, then we have to listen. But otherwise, there is so much reading out there. We like in the news recently, Reni Eddo-Lodge's book, "Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race." That is top of the bestsellers in England, and it's top of the bestsellers in America. Lots of people will be aware of that. That book will. If you read that book and you come out of it still a racist, then you are probably irredeemable. Read that book. There is so much scholarship, so many newspaper articles, so many books available, and the internet is available to most of us too. So we have all these things available, and it's for those of us who are aware of it to try and educate people within our sphere of influence, and for people to take it upon themselves to solve problems in the way that they take it upon themselves to solve all the other problems in their lives. If people that experience racism want to talk to us about it, then we listen, but we don't require them, and it is not their duty to. And as you say, it would be nice to see some public solidarity from people with a platform, particularly when it's just a matter of supporting your mates, which you should be doing as a mate as well as a human being.
Yeah, no, totally. Look, we were supposed to talk about football. We were supposed to talk about the absence of crowds and how it might be good for Manchester City, but we got rightfully sidetracked by the big story of the day. One last thing about how Manchester United are doing at the moment, as an avowed Manchester United fan. What's your level of positivity towards how things are going?
Yeah, I thought they played quite well against Spurs. They probably, they should have won the game based on the number of chances they created relative to what Spurs created, but Spurs was by far the hardest game that they had left, and when you're 1-0 down with less than 10 minutes to go, a draw is obviously a decent result. I would expect United to step it up from here, because I feel like it's become quite clear what United's best team is now as well. But Paul Pogba obviously might be problematic if you've got Pogba and Fernandes against a good team, because they're both high-risk, high-reward players, which means you end up giving the ball away quite a lot. If you're playing Manchester City, you won't see it again for a while. But against the teams that United should be beating, if you've got a midfield of Pogba and Fernandes, then you would expect to create enough chances to win. And similarly, Daniel James played against Tottenham because he's good against better teams when there's space to run into. The way it turned out was Spurs sat deep, so Daniel James wasn't that helpful, and United got better when Mason Greenwood came on. I would expect to see Mason Greenwood take his place against Sheffield United tomorrow night, and it looks quite a lot like, with Pogba and Greenwood in, that would be United's best front six. And they should have enough to win every game that they've got. It's unlikely that they will, but then Chelsea have to play Manchester City and Liverpool, so it's unlikely that Chelsea will either. So it looks like it's 2 from United, Chelsea and Wolves. And from United's fixtures, it looks like they should have enough to finish in the top 5, which should probably be enough for the Champions League. So I think that as they get fitter, they will obviously get better, but there were good signs against Spurs that the good form that we saw before the break is something that will continue, I think.
One last question. How has your recovery from COVID been? Because there's been stories here of people actually being completely wiped out months and months after they get it.
I would say physically, I'm probably not quite where I was before it, but I don't know if that is also, been sitting in a house eating and drinking for quite as long as I have. So it might be that. I had an antibody test, and for people that have antibodies, 0.4 is the average, and I was 6.06, which is more than 15 times what the average antibodies is. So it's fair to say that I definitely had it. And during the time when I had it, because I didn't have that many of the telltale signs, I was sort of beginning to wonder whether I did actually have it. But otherwise, I feel quite lucky that I had it and it wasn't so physically terrible as it has been for other people. And ultimately, as I said at the time, but the main thing for me about Corona was mentally how tough it is when you wake up in the night and you're thinking it's today the day it all turns to shit. And that didn't happen. So I guess I feel quite lucky that didn't happen to me, because it's still happening to a lot of other people.
Well, look, I'm glad it didn't. It's great to chat to you again, and stay well. Thanks a million.
See you again, chaps. Look after yourself. Bye.
0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to get in touch with us this morning. We will obviously preview the football in a bit more detail over the coming days, and we'll look back at that Man United game a little bit later on in the week. Up next this morning, we're going to bring you the sports pages. First, though, here's golf journalist Shane Ryan. He spoke with Nathan last night about how COVID-19 has affected the PGA Tour.
Have you changed? Did you notice a change in attitude as the week went on from the players to the procedures that are in place? Because obviously we saw Rory McIlroy last week questioning why some of the Europeans hadn't come over, that this is their job, this is their livelihood, they should be there. And I think a lot of them probably quite smug this weekend that they're not there.
Yeah, I don't think that quote from Rory is going to age well. And you guys know I like Rory quite a bit, but I don't think that was a good comment from him. And I think it's going to look worse as time goes on. I don't know how familiar your Irish listeners are with geography and culture of America, but the American Southeast is one of the most backward, ignorant places probably that exists in the Western world. And I live here, so I think I can say that, even though I'm from the North, so they would probably tell me I can't. But what's happening is all these states are opening up, and South Carolina is one of them. And you'll be shocked to know that when they opened up and let people go back out in public, the coronavirus cases spiked. And a lot of these places, including South Carolina, are showing more higher cases than even what it was at the worst times. Unfortunately, Justin Thomas was exactly right. Hilton Head's a zoo. We have people in this country who think that wearing a mask is a liberal political statement. So this is what we're dealing with. But to get to your question, yeah, I think things did change a little bit. Webb Simpson even had a comment about he had been cautious and he had been social distancing, but he was going to even take it a little more seriously, whatever that meant. And there were a few people who said that, of course, the Nick Watney test, it's not that they didn't expect a positive test to happen. They always knew it was going to. But the reality of it is different than saying, oh, yeah, we knew this was going to happen. The reality of it can't help but be jarring. And, in the best case scenario, it's one of those things that changes people's behavior for the positive. And hopefully Watney's okay. And it ends up being maybe a good thing that taught us a necessary lesson.
OTB AM.
Right, we're going to get to the sports pages in just a moment. But this Friday at 12 o'clock, we're going to be giving you another chance to win $2,000 in our new game show, Know Your Football. We've added another €1,000 to the prize fund after there was no winner last week. So this Friday at 12 o'clock, it's a live game show. You can register at the following link. It's quiz.otbsports.com. That's quiz.otbsports.com. Log in just before 12 o'clock on Friday. Make sure you're there for the 10 minutes beforehand and you can play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers and remember to always gamble responsibly. Right, it is time for the sports pages. It's 8:38. Let's start with otbsports.com, and it's Essendon received big boost, but mystery of Conor McKenna's test remains. So this is a story that we're going to be going to Australia to get the very latest from Nicholas Walsh in just a couple of minutes' time. Again, ashamed and upset, Burnley captain Ben Mee responds to racist banner. And dangerous for the RFU to go up against the GAA in summer, the global rugby calendar. This was an interesting conversation that the lads had last night on Monday Night Rugby. Roy O'Connor talking about the global rugby calendar and what it would be like for Ireland for the RFU to have games on up against the GAA. This is an interesting conversation. Do people think that the rugby fans are also GAA fans and the GAA fans are also rugby fans? Will O'Callaghan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange one as well, because you wonder how much of a real overlap there's going to be between the two seasons, because the Pro 14 is going to be played off reasonably quickly when we get back at the end of August and into September. They want their season to be completed by October and back out for the new campaign about 2 or 3 weeks later. The only real overlap that you're going to have are the early stages of the new GAA season, which are going to be the league for the first 2 weeks, if reports are to be believed, and perhaps some of the lower grade hurling competitions, which would clash with the final stages of the Heineken Champions Cup. But realistically, I mean, look, it's going to be a case of the GAA's in a different window this time around. I think people on a given weekend can quite happily sit down and watch a Champions Cup quarter-final or semi-final and then revert back to watching a GAA game on a Sunday. I don't think they're actually going to do a huge amount of damage to each other. I think the days of having one sport over the other.
Yeah, I think so in a redrawn rugby calendar where rugby becomes a summer sport, much more of a summer sport, really. You kick everything back a month. I actually think that you could have these festivals of sport around Ireland and everybody will be going and watching a little bit of everything. You obviously have your refuseniks. We all know some very dyed-in-the-wool GAA people and very dyed-in-the-wool rugby people, and never the twain shall meet, except on Twitter for spats every 6 months in a very organised way. Would it be that much? Is it really going to damage? Is there a casual fan who they're both fighting for the 25 quid to go and watch a Pro 14 match or a championship match in June and July? I don't think so, is there?
No, I don't know. I mean, again, it's one of those things. You're probably going to make a decision, particularly if it's your own county you were playing. If these proposals for the summer were to happen and we're looking beyond the year that's just about to go, let's say if you go into July and there's interesting games due to take place between Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere teams, depending again on what hemisphere those games take place in, say if they're in the Southern Hemisphere, people can quite easily watch those games in the morning and watch their Gaelic games in the afternoon. Rugby, I think, is going to be pretty much across Saturdays anyway. Sunday will probably be kept fairly sacrosanct for the GAA Championship. And again, I know plenty of people who can make a decision that they want to watch X, Y, or Z on TV. They'll happily watch the second game if they flick in between. I really don't think they're going to do a huge amount of damage to each other.
Friday Night Lights is the thing. So what's in the Examiner first this morning, Will?
Well, the Irish Examiner has kind of a mix of stories. Understandably, they've got the plane as their main picture, the White Lives Matter Burnley story, which we discussed a little bit earlier on and is across all the papers today. Interesting story in the top kind of banner there about Irish sports, because they've spoken to some of the CEOs, because outside of the kind of big three of rugby, soccer and GAA, who are going to get about 40 million of the 70 million package from the government, the rest of the sport in Ireland are basically going to be vying to get that 30 million pot. Boxing are suggesting that they could lose 1 million in their accounts by the end of the season. Big concerns from rowing about will people go for their membership renewals in August and September when they might be concerned about a second wave of COVID-19. And Hamish Adams, who you can see a picture of in the inset there from Athletics Ireland, he is quite concerned about the new normal and potentially some of the restrictions they'll have to put in place for races that they would have had normally in the autumn and even into 2021. He says even though we're getting back to sport, there's no guarantee it's going to be exactly the same. And Simon Lewis down the left-hand side reporting on Munster and Leinster getting back to training. Munster fans who went to UL yesterday didn't get to see Arge Sneeman and Damien De Allende because they're still coming back. De Allende is carrying a slight injury, as is Keith Earls at the moment, but they're both expected to be fit for the interprovincials coming up on the 22nd of August. And it steps up in Ireland with Connacht and Ulster going back to training next week, Ger.
The back page of the Irish Independent this morning ripped Johnny Sexton in taking a break from training yesterday. And GAA lights, camera, action, but only when we say you can. So this is about the streaming of club games. County boards have been warned off, saying that you can't just do it willy-nilly. You have to do it whenever you're told you can do it by GAA headquarters to make sure that the rights holders will get value for their contracts. And Harrington in the dark over plans to postpone Ryder Cup to 2021. That was the story yesterday, that it looks like a deal is nearly hammered out to kick it back for a year, and Harrington's obviously not going to jump the gun on making that public. And then FAI silent on restructuring as process based on competency takes shape. So they're continuing ahead with their plans to make the new appointments for senior jobs. The ad went out for the CEO's gig a while back, even though we already kind of have a very strong indication that there are some candidates who are likely candidates for it at the moment. So it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out, and people are very interested in how the new FAI is actually going to be different from the old FAI, if it is going to be that different. So we'll wait and see and keep an eye on that one.
Back page of the Times then, Ger. Mourinho on stats offensive to keep Kane. People probably saw these comments responding to Paul Merson's claim that Harry Kane's goal totals might come down under Jose Mourinho's playing style. Mourinho says he has all 6 of his forwards available now. He expects they can transition to a more attacking style over the next 5 weeks, and he is absolutely determined to keep Harry Kane beyond the end of this season, with perhaps some of their rivals circling around and Tottenham having to take a loan to just basically keep themselves liquid until the end of the season. But he's determined that Harry Kane will stay. You can see Andy Murray in the top right-hand corner of the Times as well. He's had plenty of criticism for the test event that took place for tennis last weekend. Once there were positive tests back for COVID-19, the world number 1 Novak Djokovic got out of town pretty quickly. Andy Murray has branded that not a good look for tennis, Ger.
No, it isn't. I mean, what the hell is going on? And Novak Djokovic is... His character, one of the things that's happened here is we know a lot more about who Novak Djokovic is as a result of coronavirus, and I, for one, am glad that we do know as much as we do. 8:45 this morning, I'm going to bring you the Irish Times, and there it is. FAI press ahead with new appointments for senior jobs is the headline on Emmett Malone's piece. Good detail in that about what's coming next. Foden and Mahrez double up for dominant Manchester City. Mourinho hits back at Merson with list of stats. And they also have Keane's former advisor during Saipan saga dies. So this is Michael Kennedy, who was a central figure in many of the big stories around Irish football as essentially Roy Keane's agent, even though he wasn't an agent. He was a solicitor who would have advised him on his contracts, and a bunch of other Irish players as well. I think it was introduced by O'Leary. David O'Leary was the first person, I think, who had Michael Kennedy as his advisor. Kennedy was second generation Irish and then ended up working with a bunch of Irish players, eventually making David Connolly move to Feyenoord in 1997. That was one of those ones like, what the hell, where did that come from? But it came from the mind of Michael Kennedy and his ability to negotiate good deals.
Back page of the Mirror Sport this morning. Again, the Harry Kane story is very much prominent. Quoting for Jose Mourinho's press conference, Harry is Spurs, Harry is staying, is the simple message that Jose Mourinho has given. He's shut down any possibility of Harry Kane leaving the club this summer. And you can see Neil Maupay there with Guendouzi at the top of the paper. And Maupay, of course, was pretty much a pantomime villain at the weekend. He was involved in the incident with Bernd Leno, though he insists that he didn't mean to injure the goalkeeper when they had it coming together on the edge of the box. He then went on to score the winner and was pretty happy to try and wind up some of the Arsenal fans at the full-time whistle. And you can see Guendouzi, who apparently is not going to face an FA charge, despite you can see his hand around the throat of Neil Maupay at full-time at the game on Saturday afternoon.
The Daily Star, the Irish Daily Star this morning, back page here for you, is shameful. White Lives Matter Burnley protest. Me slams racist banner as City make Liverpool wait. Jose determined to retain Keane. They've got a piece on Des Smith, and Ryder Cup due to be postponed. Heat rising on McKenna. Carlo Kane says Conor McKenna's AFL future is in major doubt after the former Tyrone underage star was caught in the eye of a coronavirus storm. So obviously a bit of a feeding frenzy going on around this, but AFL greats Cameron Mooney and David King have waded into the debate to say that he should never play again. He should never play another, may never play another senior AFL game. So he... I mean, the story seems like he attended an open house viewing with the lease of his own house up and also visited friends. It's like, Jesus.
Seems pretty extreme. We've got the Daily Mail back page today as well, Ger, and one of the stories they have that perhaps hasn't been picked up by the others is the idea by the Premier League, this is at least according to Matt Hughes' report, that they might keep the transfer window open for longer than Europe at the end of the current campaign. They're looking at potentially extending the transfer window until October. That's an exclusive from Matt Hughes. ITV are set to extend their racing deal. Apparently they've reached a £20 million deal to extend there. And Guendouzi, again, is on the back page of the Daily Mail, and apparently he said to some of the Brighton players at the weekend, I earn more than you ever will. And that's what he said while they were having that argument at the end of the game.
Classy dude. The front page of The Sun this morning, Randolph, my racism hell as a child. Growing up in Ireland, racial slurs were the norm. He was spat at and verbally abused at footy games. This is an exclusive with The Sun. I've spoken to Darren Randolph, and there's some fairly horrific details in that story as well. The back page of The Sun, he's one of our own, Mourinho and Kane warning, so obviously a bit of a slow news day when it comes to this. Jack booted Dean Smith, slammed the boot boys, the boo boys, I presume, who have targeted Aston Villa ace Jack Grealish. Sorry, it is about how often he's been kicked. And Jeff Hendrick's time at Burnley looks to be over. He's attracted interest from AC Milan as well as Newcastle and Celtic. So there are options for Jeff Hendrick, and they're all pretty good options at the moment.
In The Guardian, Will Carling is doing a Patrick Bateman. That bloke you saw on the pitch, it's never the real me. He's nowhere near who I am. So apparently Will Carling is illusionary. We've got Jose Mourinho talking about Harry Kane, saying that his hero Kane will stay at Spurs beyond the end of this summer. And also in a COVID-19 story, which has a knock-on effect when it comes to teams who are going to be travelling this summer, potentially for international competition. It's after 3 of the Pakistan cricket squad tested positive ahead of travelling to England. They need to go to England for a 14-day self-isolation period before they play against England this summer, and 3 of those players won't be able to travel. Ireland are due to play England in 3 one-day internationals at the tail end of July, and the West Indies are set to travel to England too. But obviously that has an implication when it comes to international travel if players are to test positive for COVID-19 before they're due to fly out.
So there is a British tennis tournament this weekend, and that's what the Telegraph front cover wraparound is. It's actually an ad. Live tennis is back as the best of Britain's men compete. That's the Telegraph for you there, and they also have all the usual match reports too. So that is the latest from the Telegraph this morning.
Bit of Gaelic games in the Herald today. Frank Roach is reporting on the tweet from the Wicklow footballer Conor McKenna, where he was wondering why professional sport have been doing as much testing as they have, but yet the GAA players can return to training from this Wednesday and then take contact training from next Monday. He was also wondering why you'd be able to hang out for 60 minutes with the rest of your teammates when you've had to be in lockdown for the last few weeks. So Frank Roach is reporting on that tweet. Dr. Neil Moyne is also in page 33 of the Herald today, talking about the potential injury risk to players when they come back after just a few weeks of contact training and then into a busy period of games. We see that the title race is kept at least 2 games longer. Liverpool will have to wait until Thursday when Man City play. Even if Liverpool were to win against Crystal Palace, they need City to drop points. You can see the Jeff Hendrick story is also on the back of the Herald about his contract issue, and Seamus Coleman says he wants a winning culture at Everton. He was excellent against Liverpool against Sadio Mane at the weekend.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing that Carlo Ancelotti's got to remember as well. So next for me, the Irish News for you this morning. We've got the back page here. Frampton and Conlon lined up for London Bill. August return likely for Belfast GO, and GPA meet GAA ahead of master fixtures publication. So let's take this moment to see if we can actually fix the fixtures as opposed to just having these constant arguments about when we can get back to play. Wouldn't that be a good idea? Use this free time when there's no matches on to fix the fixtures. Now's your chance.
And for me, the back page of the Racing Post today, Ger, Frankie Dettori is set to get the ride on English King for the Epsom Derby, understandably after the week that Frankie Dettori has just had at Royal Ascot. You see Batash and the inside story of his path to Royal Ascot glory, finally in the 3rd attempt, winning last week. You see a story about Emmett Mullins as well on the right-hand side in the Irish edition of the Racing Post today. Story by David Jennings, and that's about the Irish trainer Emmett Mullins, who is a nephew of the champion trainer Willie Mullins, who's been fined €5,000 by the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board, and he's also going to have to face a 3-month ban from courses after he breached COVID-19 violations when he was looking to get into Leopardstown last week. And you can see also on the other side of the paper the confirmation about Frankie Dettori getting his pick of the rides, and he is going to be on that favourite for the Derby, and that will be, at least at the moment, English King.
Let's have a look at what's on the OTB Sports app for you here this morning. When you open the app, obviously it brings you to your personalised home feed. You can select your own stories and your own sports. So that's also, of course, down at the bottom there's the OTB Sports Radio tab where you can listen to our sports radio station all day long, which has some amazing stuff from our archives. And of course you can check out our latest video in that section as well. And then in the OTB Podcast Network, you'll find all of our latest podcasts. Yesterday we launched our brand new series with Alan Quinlan, How's the Head?, as he chats to sports people about how they manage their own mental health. John Kerwin was the first guest, really powerful chat, an icon of New Zealand sport who suffered his own mental health issues and has come out the other side and is now out there being an advocate for mental health issues, not just for sports people but for everybody. So really great stuff from Alan Quinlan with John Kerwin, and that's the type of good stuff that you're getting if you download the OTB Sports app. Just go to the Play Store or the Apple Store and search OTB Sports and click download, and it's yours, free, gratis and for nothing. Well, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. Now, I want to move on and talk to Nicholas Walsh, former AFL and Cavan footballer. Nicholas Walsh is with us. Nicholas is the Mental Health Programme Manager at the AFL Coaches Association, and we're talking now about the Conor McKenna story this week in Australian football. And the news just in about Conor McKenna is his 4th test has come back negative Nicholas, good morning to you.
How are you, boys? This is changing by the minute over here, and I've put the background as an empty MCG because the last couple of weeks has been really eerie watching it on TV. So just to give you a bit of a snapshot of what to come in the GAA world as well, it's so different. And obviously the whole Conor McKenna stuff over the last week has been quite interesting in the media. I'm not sure if your followers have been listening to it closely, but he returned from Ireland 3 to 4 weeks ago. He was quarantined in the hotel, which are government rules here in Australia. He tested negative twice in that period of time. Then he was obviously released. He was then tested 7 times, in total 5 within the club setting. On the 5th test, there was shown an irregularity, which then he was brought in for a secondary test on the Saturday morning after having full contact training with the group the day before. He tested positive on that day. Since then, he's had another test subsequently today, and it's just been reported that he has now tested negative again. So this is moving like rapid pace here, and it's quite interesting. I haven't got any AFL confirmation. I've got a number of tweets and different things coming through now on it, but it's interesting. The fact that Conor McKenna has been, essentially could have been hung out to dry, where he may have done, nothing wrong at all.
Well, talk to us about that, because it seems like there's been a feeding frenzy where he has become something of a lightning rod, where it looked like people were waiting for an excuse to batter one of the AFL players, and he was the first one across and has absolutely been the victim of some fairly horrific stuff.
Yeah, there's been so much negative media around it as well, and there's a couple of reports coming out of Sydney as well, a couple of radio stations that were even claiming he should never play again, and he's brought down the competition and all this end of things. But I'm not sure how many people just paused to look after how actual Conor was going himself. Because obviously it would have been a very, very tough time for him. None of us would like to be diagnosed with COVID-19. It'd be an absolutely, gut-wrenching thing to be told you have, especially in the club setting, especially when he travelled overseas. And then, it was thrown up that he broke the rules, which isn't proven yet. And all he has claimed is that he visited an open for inspection, which is a bit murky in terms of the AFL protocols, and also visited his ex-host family, which in AFL rules, you're allowed to visit immediate family, but Conor is so close to that ex-host family that he initially stayed with when he came over with. They're like his second family from home. So yet they're not blood, but saying that they're very, very close to him. So rules are murky. Whether he stepped outside those rules or not are still yet to be determined. But now the test has come back as a false, and it was speculated in the media today that it could return as a false positive, which essentially that's what's happened.
So Tom Brown from 7 News Melbourne is reporting on Twitter that Conor McKenna's 4th test has come back negative. Working on implications, latest shortly, #exclusive. So, and that was just tweeted about 10 minutes ago. So this is a fairly amazing story. And I can imagine how happy and relieved he must be, because at one stage this fixture this weekend was in some doubt, but over the last kind of 24 hours or so, they were like, no, we're definitely going to, at least the fixture is going to go ahead. So the whole notion that the league was falling apart because one player tested positive, which seemed fairly ludicrous in itself, has now been debunked.
Yeah, I think the AFL were pretty strong. Once Conor did test positive, they then handed it over to the DHHS, which is the HSE equivalent here. And essentially, they had to do all the contract tracing in relation to who Conor had been in contact. They looked at the footage of training, in detail, and they had a context session on, I believe, Thursday, and they had a light training session then on Friday before we're due to play the game on Sunday. And he had only been in contact from the footage with around 8 players in total. But when they went back and revisited the footage, he'd only impact with only 1 player from that group of 8, because with any contact training, the protocols in Australia is that you can only have a group of 9 or 8 plus a coach, 9 in total in small contact groups. And this week they've even, reinforced that message to the professional clubs. They're allowed 1 collective training session a week, and everything else has to be done in small groups of 9. Can
we just tease out some of the treatment of this? I want to show up some tweets for the last few days here. So Catherine Murphy, who I think is an Irish reporter, actually kind of getting to the bottom of this here and saying some of the reporting around Conor McKenna's positive COVID-19 test is so disappointing. He's actually a human being. No one plans to catch a virus and take down the AFL. For anyone actually concerned with his well-being, you'll be pleased to know he's doing okay considering. So that was, I think, on Saturday. Before that, and the reason that she felt the need to tweet this was like some of the other stuff has been fairly grim. So if we can roll on to the next tweet. Our cameraman have shot some close-up vision of McKenna training yesterday. Here he's McKenna, of course. I don't know what's normal for winter. Make your own assessment. He clears both nostrils of snot and looks like he is slightly spluttering. Pictures 6 p.m. at 7 News Melbourne. This is the same guy who's now reporting the exclusive that he's actually not got coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, so Tom Brown is one of the main AFL football reporters here in Melbourne, and if there's whatever it is, he'll report about it and tweet it, and he does give you the scoop, he gives you the updates and whatnot, but sometimes they're too extreme. We all know from playing sport and football and all that sort of stuff that we do clear our nostrils and we do spit because it is pretty warm, and he's probably just getting back into training and all that sort of stuff. And for the camera to hone in on that, and it even reported that he fist pumped someone as well. Oh wow, you can't do that in this day and age, but yet they're still allowed to go out on the weekend and tackle 80 plus times in games and go one-on-one and high five after kicking a goal and all this sort of stuff. So there's some of the reporting has been really, really disappointing, and I think some really strong personnel in the media have come out and said, look, the well-being and the health and safety of Conor is most important. Don't worry if he has broken rules or whatever, we'll deal with them in time. But just let's make sure he is safe and effective, and that if he has been in contact with anyone else, that they're safe and effective as well. But if he's now testing a false positive, then is there many people that need to be looking at that?
Yeah, for sure. Have you been in contact with him? Like, is the community so small that you know Conor at all?
Yeah, I know Conor pretty well. Just a few brief text messages, just checking in with him, making sure he's okay. He reassured me no symptoms whatsoever. He feels perfectly fine. Bit disappointed with the, just being stuck on his own and isolating again after spending 2 weeks on his own in a hotel after coming back from Ireland. And yeah, he's in good spirits. He's in good spirits, and the Irish consulate here reached out to him as well, and they're very supportive of any Irish immigrant that's living in Australia as well.
Okay, so look, the whole notion, people are waking up this morning to the back page of the papers, reading comments from former AFL players questioning about whether or not Conor's going to have an AFL future. That's all put to bed as soon as this negative test comes out. It's like, well, I mean, maybe he breached some rules. There might be some suspension. You'd expect a good barrister to be able to wiggle his way around the nuances of that too. And away he goes, right? At the end of this, it's like, this is hopefully the ultimate storm in a teacup for him.
Yeah, and potentially, and if you look at it, like it's been reported, like there's been 13,000 tests. The AFL players have gone through 13,000 times. So there's 18 teams in the competition with 40 players on their squads. And essentially, they get tested 3 times a week. So it's rigorous testing that they go through. One has come back positive, and a couple of days after now, hopefully it's false positive. So there has been scares early in the season that some players showed symptoms. They were tested and they were negative. So, like, out of all the testing, and if you look at Australia as a country, it's been a really, really good turnaround in terms of flattening the curve here with the whole coronavirus. And, there's very little corona case at the moment. The government have lifted restrictions in basically every state but Victoria, the one we're in, because we've a small spike. And when I talk about a small spike, I'm talking about 11 and 12 and 17 per day on the back of potential protests that have happened over the last few weeks. But there's no deaths, or very little deaths, I should say. And I think Australia as a country is in a very good shape. But you're right, it is a bit of a storm in a teacup. And, we just hope that the whole thing hasn't been a bit of a debacle, which it is looking, and we just hope that Conor can, get out there and hopefully play maybe this weekend. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like, perhaps they'll suspend him as some kind of reaction to the reaction in one way, which would be very unfair if it turns out he actually has never had this at all and it was just a complete mistake. Why was the response so vicious and so vitriolic, or is that just how the media works there?
I think it goes sort of both ways. It's one, how the media works. It's two, the fact that his name was released, which I was a bit surprised early days why was his name released, but then I was explained to me that they had to follow up with people that he'd been in contact with and it would have broke anyhow. And also just the third thing around, Conor sort of flagging that he wanted to go home and he was homesick and that sort of thing. So the media could have jumped on that fact as well, that, well, maybe he doesn't really want to be here type thing. Which in my mind is completely wrong, because if he didn't want to be here, he'd still be at Ireland and he wouldn't have returned. And in fairness to the club, Essendon, they've been really supportive to Conor, and Conor has been very open and transparent with the club because he has been homesick. He got a chance to go home in February to spend time with his family and friends. He's been helping train on the local GAA team here before all this, just to get back into that Irish community as well. Then he came back. He played, a couple of scratch games and the first round, and then COVID-19 struck and he went back home. So then he came back again. So for people saying that he doesn't want to be here, it's why would you, keep coming back and forward if he didn't want to be? So I think he definitely has a future here. He's a very, very talented player. He's in the top probably 3 or 4 players that ever played the game from an Irish point of view here in Australia. And he's a very exciting player to play. And I know the club see a big future for him.
All right, Nicholas, last question for you. The actual league itself, has it been good? Has the standard been good? Are players kind of back to where they were before this all happened?
It's been different. Playing in front of no crowds is a major thing now. The TV have done great to put false sound and everything on it. So, and from a spectator's point of view, it's been okay. The players obviously didn't get a lot of running time in terms of contact or training as a group and all that sort of stuff. So the first round or so was a bit fumbly. They've changed the rules around the length of time, so the quarters are shortened. Just due to the impact of load, because there's still there's still 15 weeks left of a season. They've shortened the season, shortened the quarters, but for the players themselves, and speaking with some of them, that intensity of championship, like the Ulster Championship, Leinster Championship, you don't get that buzz of kicking a point or kicking a goal type thing. You don't have that energy to feed off if you make a big tackle and you hear sort of the. Not that you're listening out for it, but you hear that crowd, pushing on and that adrenaline push. That's just not there. And that's very evident on the TV. But in fairness, most of the players have adapted really, really well. There's been some very surprising results come out of it. Some of the teams that were going really well last year and early this year aren't going so well. So there's some clubs adapted to the off period really well, and some others have a bit of catching up to do.
Yeah, all right, Nicholas, great stuff. Perfect time was joining you this morning. Thanks a million for filling us in and all that.
No problem. Okay.
It's Nicholas Walsh down in Australia giving us some breaking news there, essentially, that Conor McKenna was not actually carrying COVID-19 when he was tested. So there's been a false positive there. So it'll be very interesting to see exactly what happens and whether or not he faces a suspension. But you can, I'm sure, breathe a sigh of relief from his perspective at the moment. Right, it's just after 8 minutes past 9 here this morning on OTB AM. Still plenty to come this hour as Diarmuid Lyng and the former Connacht rugby player James Connolly join us a little bit later on this hour. But first, a reminder, we've got exclusive live radio commentary of brilliant Premier League games coming up for you on OTB Sports this week. Wednesday at 8:15, it's Liverpool against Crystal Palace. Nathan Murphy and Brian Kerr on duty for that one. On Thursday at 8:15, it's Chelsea against Manchester City. Nathan and Stephen Kelly on duty for that one. And then Sunday at 4:30, it's Watford versus Southampton. Stephen and Damien Delaney on duty for that. And of course, on Thursday week, Manchester City against Liverpool. Nathan and Brian Kerr. Kickoff is at 8:15. So some night soon you should be hearing Liverpool winning the league live on OTB Sports. We're back with Diarmuid Lyng after this.
AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
They had one more day to rest. we were really in trouble to build the team.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Oh, sweaty palms. Of course, you guys know what it's like, but that was nervy, yeah.
The OTB Brief, online every morning from 7 a.m. on offtheball.com, the Go Loud app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Come on, Tom, are you nearly finished hanging that plasterboard?
I'm going as fast as I can, but...
Have you not heard? The Tech 7 adhesive and sealant lads have introduced a new foam adhesive, Tech 7 Foam Tack.
Oh, Foam Tack? I heard people talking about that, all right.
Well, you should be using that. Tech 7 Foam Tack is super strong, quick and easy to use, inside or outside.
You're right. I'm out of here.
Home early?
Nah, to the Builders Merchants to buy my Tech 7 Foam Tack, of course. Tech 7 Foam Tack, available now at your local Builders Merchants.
OTB AM.
For those of you who are listening on the radio, we're watching some amazing slowed down footage of a Kitog, Diarmuid Lyng, hurling and surfing at the same time. Ball in the right hand, left hand, wielding the hurl, perfect balance. Diarmuid, this is a thing of beauty. How the hell did this happen?
Ger, I'm not a Kitog, unfortunately. I'm just upside down. I was always told I should change because I'd be slower in my reflexes with my left hand on top. Honest to God, this happened to Martin Quigley, and all these lads who were involved with me from a young age used to say, if you don't sort this out and change, you're going to be slower and you're not going to make the level you need to make. And I tried for a while and it just didn't suit me. My father used to say, look, that's how you pick the hurl up, so just stay at it. So I don't know, it suits the surfing a little bit more maybe.
But you do have the hurl in your left hand at that stage. It looks perfectly like...
That's how I hurled, Jared. That's how I hurled. Left hand upside down, essentially upside down. A Kitog. I remember the Galway team of the 80s, I think there was 4 or 5 of them hurled the same way. So I feel like I kind of could justify it when legends like Joe Cooney were doing it too.
I think Jerry McInerney, was he the same?
Mm-hmm. God, there was a few of them. I don't think Coleman was. McInerney, I'm not sure either. I definitely remember looking at them playing against Tipperary maybe in the '89 final and thinking, oh yeah, a couple of those fellas hold the hurl the same way as I do. But I'm right-handed, so it was just always upside down. I was told, but it worked fine in the end.
So this is footage from a new project that you've been working on with Timmy Creed. People might not be familiar with Timmy. There was a great piece that Michael Foley did in the Sunday Times the weekend about Timmy's background. He is a playwright and a hurler and has actually written a play about hurling. So maybe you can explain to us about him a little bit and then about your collaboration after that. How did you get to know Timmy and who is he?
Yeah, Timmy Creed. I met Timmy Creed at a festival. I think it was actually the first festival I ever went to. I was like 31. I didn't make festivals during my time playing hurling. So I went to a festival and I met this fella, and he was a Gaelgoer as well, and we had a good chat. And we became friends, and we collaborated a little bit on this play that he did, a one-man show called Spliced. And we just would sit and chat about our experiences, and he was talking about playing with Bishopstown and I was talking about playing with Wexford and with St. Martin's, and trying to get a hold of what happened to us in the time and maybe what the influences were from a young age that maybe when we matured into adult players didn't serve us so well. And we both kind of fell out with the game at a certain time and went off and explored different things. So we shared the story, even though it was a little bit at different levels. But when I play hurling on the beach now, it certainly doesn't seem like different levels. But that was how I got to know him, and I was just blown away actually by Spliced, and that was maybe my own reaction to it initially. But when I saw up in Clare, one of the things that Timmy was trying to do was to bring a kind of a social element to it as well. So once we showed the play, I'd go on the road a little bit with Timmy, and once we showed the play, we'd open it up to the floor then afterwards with GAA people from different places, and one of those places was in Clare, in a squash court. Usually it's done in a handball alley, an outdoor handball alley preferably, but handball alley or a squash court or whatever. And James O'Connor and Podge Collins were there. And Podge, I know it would be savvy in the realm of some of the things that come up. There's a lot of maybe a kind of a focus on our well-being as young men playing the game. But I could really see that Jamesy was affected by it, and I was very interested going up there to see how would Jamesy be affected by it, and he was really blown away by it. And people asked like really good questions afterwards. They were like, they were angry with him for presenting this side of the GAA. That's maybe the negative side. It is maybe a little bit more of a negative side of it, but it's also just represented one side that doesn't always get an airing. And I couldn't recommend it enough for GAA clubs to show to their younger players to say this is how it can go, and you have a choice at this stage to not go that way.
I know you don't like us talking in terms of labels, but it does sound like we're talking about toxic masculinity here.
Yeah, and a big time to talk about it. And I mean, this was the joy of doing this a short film with Timmy as well, because we didn't really have a mandate when we started off. It was about identity, but that is a very, very general thing to do. It could be about anything. And we just kind of took a camera around with us, Ger, and I would like to have a plan, because Timmy is one of these very creative people who the moment unfolds in front of him and he responds to it in an artistic way. That's, I think, what artists are. And I maybe need a little bit more certainty, or feel like I do at least. And so with this, we just would take out a camera every now and then. We were outside Timmy's house, and we were maybe going for a surf, and the car needed to be pumped up. Like the tire in the car was almost flat. But of course, for two fellas who were mad for a surf, that could happen after the surf instead of before it. But of course, Timmy's father saw that the car needed to be done and it wasn't being looked after, and he was like, "Look, I'm staying here till it's done." And I was looking at this interplay of two men, a son and a father, and the almost like the anger. It's not real anger, but there's just this visceral feeling with Timmy, who's like, he just doesn't want to do this, and he obviously, you've just a certain relationship with your father, and this is going on for years and years, and in the end, when we pumped it up, actually the tire that we changed was flat, and so the father had to kind of weigh back in. So it ended up being about Timmy and his relationship with his father, down collecting seaweed and changing the tire. We just turned the camera on at home a couple of times. Siobhan did, my partner, and it was me with Ishna playing hurling or in the kitchen. But none of it was planned. It all just kind of unfolded, and it ended up being completely and utterly about masculinity and about male relationships and about the roles that we have as males, as the son, as brothers and as friends and as fathers. And I was delighted that it happened that way, because it ended up being released on Father's Day, and also on the solstice, which is like the big time, the big solar masculine energy for those people who are into that kind of thing. That was the time for it.
Why do you feel there is a need for this now at this moment? And why did you feel that this was a story that you guys wanted to share and tell?
It's interesting at the moment. Like I see on Twitter, there's a lot about it's coming up. I see even in the trad world, in the comedy world, there's an awful lot happening at the moment where Irish women, more and more Irish women, are finding their voices with the behaviour, with our behaviour as men, I suppose. And I'll not to lump us all into one category, but that's what it feels like. It's like you don't really have a voice in it at the moment, because they need to heal and they need their time to say, I believe you, and every woman needs to be believed, and that healing is required, and I understand that. But I think sometimes that there is a power and there is a force in men, in the masculine in men, that we can be afraid of, and that we think and can be labelled at times as being inherently negative and dominant and abusive, and the patriarchy, and it's always and it's always defined as that, and there's that totally and utterly denies the glory of the power of men and their masculinity, and how beautiful and how powerful a thing that can be, and how valuable a thing that can be when steered correctly. So I suppose we just wanted to record something to say this is who we are in our relationships, to be a little bit bare in it, and to not be afraid of it, and to see what would come out in it. And I think that'll always have a value, but it certainly has. It certainly, you couldn't but see it in the commentary at the moment. Part of me does want you want to take it on, because it feels limiting. I feel it feels limiting. I understand the necessity for it, but I do feel like it can be limiting, because there's the potential is fantastic. Like
the film itself, when you switch it on, you don't know what you're going to get, right? Because obviously you haven't seen it yet, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be scripted, because in the opening scene you're carrying Timmy out of the water, and it looks like this is going to be a play, so how do you decide to tell these things? How do you decide that this is going to be watching Timmy juggle, watching the tyre get changed, watching the seaweed, carrying him out of the water, carrying your son up to the top of a rock and teaching him to look down and go, ah?
That's the unfolding, Ger. Like, none of that. Like, if you look at the shot with Timmy in the seaweed, for example, and his father is in this shape, and Timmy is, I don't know if I can do this, but Timmy's like in that shape. Like, he's bending down to one side, picking it up, and Timmy's over behind him. And I just have the camera set up in the distance. That just happened so perfectly like that. With the tyre, you couldn't script that. When we went out into the sea, and we found John Moriarty's words for that after the fact. By the time we went out, we just had this idea of an image. But actually, when we got into the sea, where we got in was the totally reckless place to go in. And as soon as we tried to lift our feet from off the ground to seem like we were carrying ourselves out of the water, one of us would carry the other out of the water, we were just getting swept out. And that happened a couple of times. And I was like, Timmy, this is completely and utterly, this is reckless. This is dangerous. Cummy Knoll is one of the most dangerous beaches in Ireland, I'd say. And he said, no, let's do it one more time. And we went one more time. I got a real pull, and I got an awful fright, because I was getting pulled out, and we were swimming with everything we had to try and get back in. And then when we walked in, the shot of walking back in, I am like, I'm at the end of my tether, really, and just grateful and delighted to be back on dry land. And we just caught that, because I suppose we put ourselves in the situation. So with Ishna the same, that's just something. We were out climbing, and Siobhan took a video, and Ishna turns around and he stands up and puts his hands up in the air, which you couldn't have imagined he'd do. And it all just, in each one, the beauty of the moment was captured. And sometimes, and I think this extends out to everything, like sometimes when we overscript our lives, we lessen the chances for this natural beauty to take place. And I think that the film captures some of that. And that may not be interesting to anybody, I understand, and I understand why it wouldn't be in a way. But if you can see what's happening, the nuts and bolts of a relationship between a father and son, and see the interaction between them, and see Timmy's expression, like, it's all happening on the screen. So I was quite happy with it in the end. And I've never, Sir Ger, look at it. I mean, I worked up there with you guys. Like, I wasn't doing any of this kind of stuff, and I was just delighted to be working with somebody whose work I had admired. So it was, it's been I was happy with it in the end.
Look, I think it is interesting to see two people steeped in hurling talking about masculinity at this moment. For what it's worth, I do think that there has been a toxic masculinity at the heart of Irish society in every aspect of our lives for a long period of time, and that it benefits nobody. It absolutely doesn't benefit young men in particular, like the mental health issues that young men are suffering. And I think this is a separate conversation to the one that's happening at the moment, and I actually, I would almost be reluctant to have this conversation right now, because the other conversation that you're talking about, that has to be amplified, and that has to be listened to, and that has to be supported. And at the same time, like, the response to Timmy's play, I haven't seen it, but I'm dying to see it now. When you're saying people were angry about it, were they angry about the fact that it was like, go out there and kill your opponent, and that's who you need to become a man?
It's much more subtle than that, and it's much more visceral as well. I mean, there's a scene in it, and this was being done at schools around the country as well, which was fantastic, where he's talking about, it's after the game, and it's in, I suppose, Reardon's or somewhere in Cork, and he's just describing it in general terms, but it's very much about out with the lads, you know, get the women, like the language of it, and he doesn't hold back in the language of it either, and it's just being very real. And then he's also contrasting that with himself and saying, this is not who I am. Like, I am saying those things, I am acting in that way, I am disrespecting women by how I'm looking at them, by how I'm speaking about them, but it's not me, and I'm just following some kind of, and maybe we're all just following some kind of story. And is this common in GAA clubs for young men? I mean, one of the hardest parts of this, and particularly at the moment with the conversation as it is, as you say, are we even entitled to discuss this at the moment? Maybe not. But that's also a very dangerous thing, because why shouldn't we be? You know, this always should be up for discussion. This always should carry the potential. And Timmy, in the end, outlines the possibilities of how we can move forward, maybe stepping a little bit more into our power and encouraging our young men to step more into our power and to not follow those kind of bullshit stories that we just maybe lazily do. But in the interaction, I find that online, in the interaction at times, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to not get bogged down in terminology and in intellectual, who's right, who's wrong, this is my side, this is your side. Like, when I think about how to maybe bring the conversation forward, I know immediately that there's a lot of men who'll be saying, oh, sure, that's like your beta, or your, you know, whatever they say about men who've been too influenced by their mothers or by
they're YouTube commenters though. Like, I agree with you, right? That conversation very quickly can be hijacked by people who want to hijack it, and actually art is probably the best response, or education and long form conversations, where you can tease things out and go, okay, well, what's your understanding of this? What's my understanding of this? Is there a shared understanding? Am I listening enough? Have I done enough listening to the people who are telling these stories? And the urgency with which people are telling these stories, women are telling these stories right now, suggests that a tipping point has been reached. And that can only be a good thing for all of us, to actually begin to learn what our country has been like for women for the last period of time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I talked to Richie Sadlier about this before, and it was a really enlightening conversation, because, and I was thinking about it, I went for a surf actually with Timmy this morning, and I was coming out of the water and I was thinking about some of these things, and I was thinking of the conversations I had with Richie, and I can't hold my hand up and say from the time that I was 16 that I'm blemish free, because I feel like I took part in a society where the subtle undertones of the relationship between men and women, at least the ones that I hung around with and that I knew and that I understood from talking to them, was that you couldn't want sex and physicality if you were a woman, and you could if you were a man. That was a kind of a base rule. You couldn't be seen to enjoy it or look for it, because the boys would tell all the other boys, and that would go around the little village, and all the village then would castigate the woman as being a slut or a tramp or whatever. And that's something that happened, you know, very often. But I think that leads very naturally, and this is what Richie was talking about, was that leads to a woman kind of saying, well, no, I don't want to, but actually she does want to. And you'd kind of understand that as the interaction. Like, I know she's saying she doesn't want to, but maybe she does, but she can't just be seen to say that she wants to. Now, I'm getting into heavy territory here and could be pilloried for it. And sure, if I am, I suppose that's unfortunate. But Richie is a fella who has gone into great depths on this. And I really, it made me feel I don't want to say that it left me off the hook, but it certainly put language on something that I did feel, was that it wasn't a malice, or it wasn't like it wasn't an extraction kind of a mentality. It was just like, that was at that time, that seemed like the interaction, but now it's becoming very clear that's no longer the way. Women, thankfully, are finding their voice, and the start of finding their voice at the moment, definitely, it's been going on for a few years now, is to deal with the trauma that's been caused by the imbalance of the relationship, and that absolutely has to be honoured and has to be accepted. And I think we still have to be able to have strong and open conversations about it as men, and not to be afraid of it, because I think there is a fear of weighing in some way, because just to be able to be honest in it is I think really, really important. I know this is far away from sport, but I think we have a huge opportunity in the GAA and in other sports to maybe shape the change in that. And I've seen it there amazingly. I suppose plenty of people have, but I've certainly seen it in groups. I remember going back to Wexford after I came back from travel, and I saw a couple of things happen where I was like, yeah, that's not. And I saw the result of it. I saw a woman picking a fella up on it. And then she got very embarrassed about picking him up on it, and said, "Oh, geez, I shouldn't have done that." And I was talking to her and said, "Jeannie, like, that's the gift he needed. Like, you know, he needed that, and he's a fine fella for it now too." So, yeah, it's I think, yeah, I know. I'm sorry, no, I feel like I'm going on a bit, but
I don't think it's a million miles away from sport. I think that this is actually the architecture you're talking about exists in those WhatsApp groups, and we've seen the evidence of that. You know, we've seen it in very high profile cases, like all around the world, in every sports forum, that the hypermasculinity leads to an adoption of poses, and that does not benefit anybody in the long run. And that's why I think your meditation on masculinity is a very interesting little injection into the conversation at the moment. And I do think it's really interesting that it's two hurlers who are doing it. And I think, like, you know, like... And
I think just for it to be, and for it not to be, and that's what I think sometimes happens, is there's also another performance that comes in that says, I should say this now, you know, that, you know, I believe all women, and I think that men should change, and toxic masculinity is a thing, and the conversation stays at that kind of a level, and that stops it from getting into the nuts and bolts more of us saying, well, this is what it is. Like, I went through this moment, and if you're going to shame me and cancel me and do all of those things, well, nobody else is going to do it, and we're going to have one conversation up here that's saying, oh, yeah, don't do those things. And then, like we did in the 60s and 70s and before here, with the shiny doorknob and all kinds of stuff happening behind, there's no, we don't make real steps, because it's like every man will come out and say, oh, it's wrong, but we're also doing it. So it's like, what are the nuts and bolts of that? And one of the ways I think to do that is definitely for example, myself and Timmy to get together and look at our relationship with our fathers, and look at our relationship with our sons, and look at our relationship with each other as friends and as brothers, and say, okay, this is what I value and this is what I don't value, and I'm going to put that forward. And it's not going to be because I want a woman to see it, and it's not going to be because I want to impress somebody. It's just, let's record what the music of what happens is and put that out there. And that was kind of the aim of it.
Yeah, look, I do think that the timing is really interesting, and I hope that it gets picked up and widely viewed. I did want to ask about the surfing. It seems to be something that you've discovered late in life, but that is, you know...
Geez, Jar, take it easy. Late in life, what do you mean?
There's no surfing in Wexford. That's what I mean. Yeah, you had to escape Wexford.
There's a little bit down in the south, apparently, but yeah, it's really just been, I think, more than anything, maybe a journey back to my body and to physicality, because after hurling, geez, the hangover from that intensity of sport is really, really phenomenal. And this is the first time, like, I got up this morning at 4:30 and headed off in the car to surf, and I wouldn't get out of bed at 4:30 for anything, like, but it seems to have captured again something, a physicality that I have and that I look for in myself. But then when you get out there and the sun is rising over the ocean, and a couple of, like, last 2 months ago, there was a full moon, and it was the brightest full moon in like 32 years or something like that, and we went out and surfed in the full moon. And when you've got a wave, we couldn't really see where we were going very well, but when you have a wave coming in and the lining, you talk about silver linings, like the lining across the whole front of the wave was moonlit from behind, and it was just, to be out in nature at that time was just really, really magical. And I find that with surfing, it's a nice mix of the very physical, but also you're out in the sea, and the sea is like just big medicine for me, and I think for the majority of people. So it's been a real, it's been a nice exploration, Ger, and it helps obviously that I'm in a place where there's loads of it.
Yeah, well, you're looking great. There was one shot that I did want to ask about. Were the cops kicking you out of the water when you were strutting down the road in your wetsuit? Did you know the cops were behind you? What was that?
What was that? I think that was awkward this year. Like, Siobhan had the camera on me and I'm walking down the road and the cops are behind, and I forgot that the cops were behind. They were there to say, like, it was an amazing day in Sharif for surfing, and there was like 15 cars and the cops came, and it was still like, it was in the 5K time, so I was within my rights to be there, but there was probably other people maybe who weren't, you know. Now there's social distance, you can't not be social distanced while you're surfing, so I think it's fine anyway. But they're coming from elsewhere. There's a surfer think nothing of leaving Dublin and driving to Sligo for a wave, you know. They just don't, that's the way they are. But for us, he just showed up. Again, in the magic of how things happen, he showed up. He asked me what I was doing, and I said I was going out surfing, and that I lived over the road, and there was no problem. But then Siobhan turned the camera on, and I'm walking down towards the camera, and I mean, what do you do when somebody's filming you walking down the road? Only something stupid, and she captured it, and because I can be too serious probably, Jerry. You know, I'm too, like, very cerebral and philosophical and all those things. And this, for me, I think was important too, to be playful and to not take myself so seriously. And so I was cringing at putting that piece in, but because I was cringing, I was like, right, it has to go in because, you know.
Where can people see it?
It's on mountshannonarts.net, the full film. It's 10 minutes. I think I put it up on my Facebook page as well. But on Mount Shannon Arts, they're the ones who commissioned it. We got funded to do it by the Arts Council and by Mount Shannon Arts Festival. So certainly any support that can be given to them is great, and to go to their site and have a look at it, and all feedback and commentary out of it is certainly welcome, because that's all it is. It's something to add to the debate, as you said, and I know you picked up on a lot of it, so I appreciate it, Ger.
Long form conversation, I think, is the answer to all of these things. I certainly, at least, will give us a pathway to some answers, if not the answer. Maybe there is no answer. Diarmuid, always great to talk to you. One last thing. Go on.
I was just saying, not 180 or 280 on a tweet. Like, you're trying to articulate these small things in a tweet. Long form conversation certainly is so much more beneficial.
Yeah. You had the word Gizzy on your hurl.
Yeah, and it was on Ishna's too. Did you see that?
I didn't notice that.
Ishna has it too. When I was doing the hurling around the world video, Philip Doyle made me those two hurls that I had, and his brother Pod does that. He etches, burns in. I actually got him to make an amazing gift for Caoimhín O'Rahillig, the fiddler, married his lovely wife Ciara, and he etched a note, a musical note onto the hurl for him as a gift, and it was beautiful. So he does those, and I asked him for a hurl, and he came back with this beautiful thing, and so he sent one down recently for Ishna as well. And it's a good idea for people who want to what would you call it, pimp their hurls, I suppose.
I thought in the overarching theme of identity, it was interesting, because I know that at various stages you've wanted to distance yourself from the hurler who was Gizzy and Diarmuid, who is the person you are now, but here you are in the midst of it, embracing everything.
Yeah, trying not to distance myself so much as integrate it maybe, and the struggle was probably with the integration at that stage, but I'm not surprised you picked up on that, Ger.
Always great to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise.
Stay well. Thanks a million. Right. Best of luck at the movie.
Take care. Thanks, Ger.
Always great to talk with Diarmuid Lyng there, and I'm sure plenty of people will have views on that. 0879 180 180 is the number that you can WhatsApp us on, or you can use the hashtag OTB AM. Will O'Callaghan is here with us to give us the very latest breaking news this morning. Will, we managed to, I think, get some information a little bit about what was going on with Conor McKenna. This has been an absolute shitstorm in Australia, and it looks like it was all an error.
Yeah, it's on otbsports.com. I just have the story up in the last few minutes. Conor McKenna's fourth and latest coronavirus test has returned a negative result, according to reports in Australia this morning. The Tyrone defender became the first player to test positive for COVID-19 following the AFL's resumption on Saturday, which led to Sunday's game between his club Essendon and Melbourne being postponed indefinitely. McKenna's weekend result was a low-level positive, with the player not reporting any symptoms of the virus, and 7 News claim now that Essendon are asking Victoria Public Health to investigate if it was actually a false positive. Despite today's negative test, the defender is still expected to remain in self-isolation until July the 4th. All of his Bombers teammates have also tested negative, but James Stewart has isolated after it was determined that he was a close contact of McKenna. It had been originally reported that McKenna had breached restrictions and had been criticised in the aftermath of the positive result. Broadcaster Ray Hadley had called for McKenna to be suspended indefinitely. It was believed that he had gone to a home inspection with his partner, and initially the police in Victoria believed that's where he may have picked up COVID-19, but it seems after all it could well have been a false negative. It could have been a false positive, I should say. And it's interesting, Jared, because when the GAA were speaking to us a couple of weeks ago, I was covering the press conference for OTB Sports, and they said one of their concerns about bringing in testing for GAA players was that testing is generally only about 70% reliable. And they were saying that that wasn't a high enough threshold for them. So it's interesting if this has slipped through and actually it's just a false positive.
Yeah, in fairness, I think Nicholas Murphy was making the point that there's been thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of tests, and this has been the first positive, and it turns out that actually it was a false positive. So, but the catastrophizing that was going on around this one individual seemed to be particularly vitriolic, and I don't know if it was because of his background and the fact that he had already confessed to the weakness of being homesick. Like, heaven forbid that somebody might miss the place that they're actually from. Or, you know, there was certainly that undercurrent of, oh, this is typical Victorians. They don't think the rules are made for them. But the outcry in Australia was so over the top. It's going to be very interesting to see the climb downs that come over the next 24 hours from, I mean, obviously there will be no climb downs because you don't get rich making climb downs in the media, but yeah, so it turns out that he's going to be fine and self-isolating, continue to self-isolate until July. That's the very latest at the moment, but you would hope that that changes in the next 24 hours or so as well, and they just release him back.
Yeah, I mean, it's a distinct possibility. I'd imagine there's going to be some interesting discussions between Essendon and the AFL. Yeah, while all the criticism was being thrown towards McKenna over the last 3 days, Essendon have been pretty consistent from Saturday afternoon, where they said they were giving their full support to the player. They've been investigating how this could possibly have happened. They're going to Victoria Public Health to see, could there potentially have been a mistake? And I would imagine that if the AFL were to allow McKenna to return to training any earlier, now that he's returned a negative test, I'm sure Essendon would be pushing to try and do so. Some other breaking news in the last few minutes. Scott McTominay has signed a new contract with Manchester United until June of 2025. The Scotland international midfielder also has the option of extending that deal for a further year. McTominay came through United's academy. He's made 75 appearances since making his debut back in 2017. I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the programme, there's real doubts about whether Jeff Hendrick will ever play for Burnley again after being left out of the squad for last night's 5-0 defeat to Man City. The Republic of Ireland international is out of contract at the end of this month. He has been offered a new deal by the Clarets and also an option just to extend until the end of the campaign. Hendrick has been heavily linked with Italian clubs AC Milan and Roma, and the Burnley manager Sean Dyche said last night it's unlikely that he will feature again this season unless a new deal is signed. An injury concern for Man City. Striker Sergio Aguero could be out for the rest of the season after suffering a knee injury last night. City's 5-0 win ensured Liverpool can't win the Premier League title against Crystal Palace at Anfield tomorrow night. The game was overshadowed by a banner reading White Lives Matter Burnley that was flown overhead before the game was due to
get underway. The Burnley captain, Ben Mee, says he's ashamed and embarrassed, while the club issued a strongly worded statement before the end of the game, vowing to give lifetime bans to those responsible.
Right.
It occurred just before a knee support for the Black Lives Matter movement, Ger.
All right, well, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. Will's been part of the programme with us here all morning, and you can read his breaking news story up on otbsports.com. Now, former Connacht Rugby and Nottingham player James Connolly joins us now to talk to us about the realities of life without a contract for a professional rugby player in the midst of 2020. Good morning to you, James. How are you getting on?
Hiya, Ger. Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So, people will remember you as being part of the Connacht squad under Pat Lam for a period of time. It was a very successful period of time for Connacht. Maybe fill us in with what happened after that. How did you end up going over to England to play?
Yeah, so basically I left Connacht last year and had the opportunity to go over to Nottingham this time last year. Headed over to Nottingham and was loving it over there. Great club, great people. Was playing some good rugby. I think I got about eight games on the trot. Was really getting into a rhythm, a good flow of playing consistently. And then unfortunately in November, I tore the cartilage in my knee and had surgery in December. So that was the season kind of ruled out for me. And it's a bit of a turbulent year in terms of injury, and then the announcement of cuttings from the RFU into the championship next season. And then obviously with COVID happening now. So it's a bit of a weird time to find myself in now, but I suppose just dealing with it and getting on with it, I suppose.
Would the cartilage have finished your season anyway? Was it the injury that significant?
Yeah, so I had a bucket handle tear in the cartilage in my knee, so that was pretty much ruled me out for the rest of the season. That's a 6 to 7 month injury. So I'm just at the end of my recovery time now. I'm back running and looking to be fit in the next few weeks.
And
yeah.
Had your initial contract been a 2-year deal? But
it was just a 1 year deal with Nottingham.
Right.
And now that it's only come in the last few months that Nottingham are going semi-pro, just with everything that's happening. Next season they're going to semi-pro, and the RFU announcing the cutting. So that wasn't for me in terms of what I wanted to do in the future. I still kind of have ambitions to, achieve in the higher level of rugby, and yeah, but I kind of find myself now in a bit of a weird situation, and that kind of, as do I'd say a lot of the players who are without a contract right now, that are in that limbo land. And I suppose when light is shed on when the new season has started, and we'll know more, and we might be able to get contracts. But for now, it's kind of clubs and are indecisive about signing, and so it's difficult. But
yeah, I'm sure it is. So what is the actual process at the moment? Like, from your own personal perspective, do you have an agent? Did you have an agent who brokered this deal for you? Is it?
Yeah, so I just had a local agent in Galway who did my contract, or did my Connacht stuff over the years, but I signed with a new agency, Elite Player Management. They're worldwide, and dealing with the agent Tom Varndell, former player for England. So I'm dealing with him at the minute, and he's looking all over the world at the minute, and everywhere is really an option for me. But it's just quite difficult now with clubs are just very indecisive, and especially in my position as a back row, it's very flooded. There's been times where I've been thinking, oh, well, I just put on 20 kilos and become a tight head prop, and might go in my favour. But no, it's hopefully in the next few months, and when teams have more clarity on when the season's going to start, and things will. Hopefully, I'll get the opportunities with a pro contract. But for now, it's limbo, as I said, I suppose.
That 8-game stretch where you played week after week after week, do you go back and gather footage of that and send that to Tom and let him send that around the world? How does that work?
Yeah. So basically, just got my footage from my 8 games, put it together, and gave it to Tom. And I also had footage of stuff when I was at my time in Connacht. So basically, just send it out to clubs and all over, Southern Hemisphere, Japan, Italy, France, America. So obviously there's been a bit of interest from the MLR, which is growing nicely, but obviously their season doesn't start till December. So there's a bit of time in between that. So it might be a case if a pro contract doesn't come up right now, that I just go ahead with AIL and get some game time under my belt and get the knee back, and then hopefully when the season is announced, whenever it starts, maybe October, or the American League starts in December, that opportunities will come up then. But I could maybe use AIL and to get some minutes under my belt,
right,
so that I'm ready for that.
So it's a bit of a safety net for you to actually at least go back and get some time. We've seen Connacht have just picked up somebody from Lansdowne in the last while, so there is kind of a pathway there. At least it's not very well established, but it does exist.
Yeah, there's definitely a pathway there. If you're playing well in the AIL, it's definitely not going to go unnoticed. And that would probably be, my thought process behind that. If I was if a pro contract didn't come up, that I'd go play AIL. Promises would know that I'm still, within the system, and that I'm there, I'm ready to go, and I could be picked up at any time. So I suppose over the last, few months, it's kind of, I suppose when you're in the pro rugby bubble, you never really think about outside rugby, and it's only in the last few months where reality has kind of dawned, and where I've been kind of looking into my career and trying to get the ball rolling and that, and it just goes to show that it's pro rugby. It doesn't last forever, and you don't know, what's going to happen, over the next while. So,
is that something that you would tap your younger self on the shoulder and go, here, listen, you need to do a little bit extra here, spend a little bit longer in college, do a bit more work experience?
100%. Yeah, I think coming through the academy and through the first few years of with Connacht, you're just in the bubble, and you think it's just going to be plain sailing. Like if it was a graph, you just think it's going to go all the way up. But it's I'll definitely look back and try to focus on getting something as a foundation to kind of fall back on. But then again, at the time I wasn't quite sure where to go in, or what career path to go into. So I think that's what I've been really thinking about over the last few weeks, is knuckling down a nice area for me to go into. And to be fair, I've been working with Rugby Players Ireland, and Deirdre Lyons has been helping me out so much with that area and that aspect. She's been brilliant. So we've just been kind of working together and honing down the area that would suit me best. And that's great, because I've been away in Nottingham for a year, and the Rugby Players Ireland, it doesn't matter whether you're within one of the provinces, they'll still they'll help you out for life. So she's I can't speak highly enough of Deirdre and the help she's doing for me at the minute.
Look, I'd say a lot of people wake up in their mid to late 20s and go, am I doing the right job? Should I actually have a bit of a career change? And despite the fact that you've had a professional sports career up to this point, I probably think that's not that unusual.
Yeah, I think that's from speaking to Deirdre and stuff, it's quite normal. A lot of people go into something, they 18 come out of school and they pick a course that maybe matches what they want to achieve in life, or salary and stuff, but then they find out they don't enjoy it that much, and end up switching. So I think I have an opportunity with Deirdre and all the assessments she's putting me through, that I can really hone in on what that perfect area, and kind of learn about myself as much, where I'd be best fitted. So that's a great opportunity. I'm grateful for having her by my side.
I wonder, in a weird way too, James, is that the type of thing that would actually give you a lot more confidence when you go back to rugby as well? Is that actually you have got this thing going on, a side hustle, which will eventually become your main hustle, but that ultimately that will give you a bit more freedom when you're playing rugby to go, right, I had this plan in place.
Yeah, I think it just, it's kind of, it has been a turbulent time, but through this time I've been able to, learn a lot about myself and get that area, get the ball rolling in that area. So it definitely 100%, it would only, make my rugby better, that I would have, I'd be more confident in, what I'm going to do after rugby, so definitely that would definitely have a good effect on me, and be positive, knowing that I have something to fall back onto.
And in terms of your rugby career, I mean, we do know in Ireland we produce a slew of back rowers. It's kind of the position that we produce the most genetic shapes for. We're really good at rowing as a country, we're really good at boxing, we're really good at producing international quality back rowers for rugby. Loads of Irish sports careers are late bloomers because there's blocks along the way, or opportunities, or injuries. So are you still hopeful that there is a significant portion of your rugby career left ahead of you? And what level do you think you're going to be able to get to?
Yeah, definitely. Like in terms of the amount, like I'm 27 now, and in terms of the amount of rugby that I've played, I feel a lot very low mileage in terms of actual game time. So 36 caps for Connacht, and 8 games for Nottingham, and 27. So I feel like, I definitely have a lot, or I would like to achieve a lot and get a pro contract, and I feel like I have a lot more to to write in that regard. So, but we'll see over the next few months what happens and whether I get a contract. So, but for now, I just got to put one foot in front of the other, and if it's AIL, to just get on with that and just see how I go. But
and when you
definitely have ambitions for myself for keeping a pro standard.
When you get to the AIL, do you feel like at that stage you have to excel, or is it just about getting to a level of fitness because you know that you're going to be good enough to be able to play in the Pro 14 or in the Premiership if an English club comes looking for you?
Yeah, I think it's just getting back into the groove of playing, and even from when I played with Nottingham, I was playing every weekend. It was just, I think as a player you learn so much more when you're playing week in, week out. It's amazing. When you get into a groove that you just constantly every week you're improving because you're just having that kind of mind muscle you're getting used to playing, and you're anticipating things quicker rather than if I was playing sporadically you'd be focusing on mental reps and visualizing and stuff, but nothing is as good as when you get on the field and you're constantly playing every week. So I learned a lot in that regard, but yeah, in terms of AIL, I'll just be trying to get my fitness back up. I haven't played since last November, so using that to kind of get my fitness back up, and then to be, in the next few months, to be ready to go for if anyone calls me up, that I'll be in good shape and ready to go in.
What would your preference be? Like, are you kind of thinking this could be an opportunity for a bit of adventure, Southern Hemisphere, Japan, America?
I think I'm not limiting myself in kind of options, so I'm just keeping all options open. We'll see what pops up. I could go to Australia, go to America. We'll see if something pops up here with one of the provinces. That'd be great too. Obviously, to stay home and to be around family would be brilliant as well. So, I'm not closing off any options right now. So
a 6-month season in San Diego sounds pretty good, though, right?
It does, yeah. The lifestyle sounds pretty good, all right. Definitely. I know a few guys that have been over there and they speak really highly of it. But then again, there's kind of part of me that kind of wants to stay around Europe. I feel as if maybe if you go to America, you're kind of out of the picture a little bit. And I feel like yes, if I was to stay around here, I feel like I've more to achieve and more to get out of it if that opportunity comes around.
Do you feel like there's a bit of unfinished business with someone at Connacht when you leave with as few caps as you had over that period of time, that you think, actually, you know what, I could go back there and really make a difference the next time?
Yeah, definitely. I think Connacht always holds a special place in my heart, and I definitely feel as if there could be unfinished business there if I got an opportunity to go back up. With a year of having experience over in Nottingham, and I suppose a few years older and stuff like that, definitely that would be a great opportunity to go back up there. It's such a special place. It's only when you leave that you realise how special a place it is, and how close the community it is, and it's just a brilliant place and a brilliant club to be a part of.
What has changed for you in terms of your own perspective as somebody who has gone away and then had that year under your belt? Because we obviously, very famously, there are the examples of the lads from Leinster who went to Leicester and then came back to Leinster, and suddenly Shane Jennings and Leo Cullen are slightly different people. They're just more intense. They've kind of witnessed something. Obviously, the Leicester environment was very special that they went to, but from your own perspective, what has changed? How are you different?
I think sometimes when you're with a club and you're with a club for so long and you're dealing with, the same people and stuff, it's just good to get out to a different club, new people, different ways of playing the game. It just gives you a better, perspective of rugby. So I think sometimes you can kind of get caught in a rut in the same place, and you can find yourself going with the motions. But when you're kind of taken out of that environment and into a different environment, and you just see a different side of rugby, I suppose. And I think it just makes you better as a person and a player, and it just gives you a better perspective on things, I think.
All right, well, listen, we wish you the very best of luck with the recuperation, and hopefully we'll see you strutting your stuff on a field sooner rather than later. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks a lot. Good talking to you.
Yeah, you too. That's James Connolly giving us an insight into what it's like to be out of contract at the moment as a professional rugby player, with no real sign just yet of when those leagues are going to be restarting across the rest of Europe. Obviously, we have a fair idea when the Pro 14 is going to start. That August 22nd date seems to be etched in stone at the moment. Right, so that has been a very busy show for you today, with plenty of food for thought and discussion across the morning. Coming up today on OTB Sports Radio at 1 o'clock, the Luke Keeney interview from OTB AM. At 6 o'clock, Keith Andrews meets Philly McMahon. And then at 7 o'clock tonight, the Republic of Ireland teammates and partners Roisha Littlejohn and Katie McCabe. The first episode in Alan Quillen's How's the Head with the guest John Kerwin, and the football show from 9 o'clock. If you've missed anything this morning, you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast. Just download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to OTB AM to get it every morning. We timestamp it for you so you can flick through it. OTB AM is live weekday mornings from 7:30 until 10. Before we go, we just want to tell you about a little fundraiser, a very important fundraiser that's happening this weekend. It's A Better Life for Livy, trying to raise life-saving funds for a little girl from Meath called Olivia Mulhern, who suffers from a condition called spinal muscular atrophy and needs to travel to the United States to receive the care she needs. Olivia met the former Meath manager Sean Boylan, the current Meath manager Andy McEntee, and Rory's stories this week. Have a listen.
Well, folks, Rory here, and we're here in Ballinmagarvey Village in County Meath, where we want to make you aware of a campaign that's currently happening. I'm here with current Meath manager Andy McEntee, former Meath manager Sean Boylan, along with Keith and Karen and little baby Livy. A Better Life for Livy campaign is happening at the minute, where we need to raise as much money as possible to make sure this little lady gets the life that she deserves. So Keith's just going to say a couple of words.
Well, Livy, she's our firstborn baby daughter. She's just over 9 months old, and she's really just a beautiful, bright, bubbly little girl. We've never really felt a love like this before in our lives. About a couple of months ago, just as the COVID lockdown was coming into place, Livy was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, which is a genetic condition. It's rare, and it affects all her, ability to move and to crawl and hold her head up. And unfortunately for us, her breathing and swallowing would be affected. Effectively, the nerves connected to her muscles are gradually deteriorating and growing weaker, and it's very serious. And we're fundraising for a treatment called Zolgensma in the States, which could really make a difference and give us hope for a better life.
You're writing on with a fountain pen on blotting paper. Once you keep the fountain pen going, everything's fine. If you stop for a fraction of a second, the blotting paper absorbs the ink. With the condition that Livy has, unfortunately, the message gets distorted, the message gets confused. She knows what she wants to do, but she won't be given that chance. Now, if she gets this treatment in the States and gets it quickly, there's a chance not just to arrest this, but to give her a totally different quality of life. And I think nobody deserves that more than Livy.
Hello everyone, this is a great opportunity for us to help a wonderful young baby. All you have to do is take one look at her and your heart would melt. She deserves a chance, as Sean says. This is an opportunity to dig deep. She needs this treatment, she needs it now. And I'll ask everybody to be as generous as they possibly can. Thank you.
Yeah, as Andy says, you just need to look at the little girl. She's absolutely adorable. So please, if you can help in any way possible, nothing's too small. I know it's hard times, so please donate what you can. There's a lot of fundraisers going on. One next weekend where a lot of the clubs around Meath and myself are going to solo a ball around the county, and over the border into Garristown, where Karen is originally from. So it should be a great day, but there's lots more happening. If you could do anything to help, please do, and support this very worthy cause. Thank you very much.
OTB is OTB Sports Radio.